Samantha, do we have enough commissioners to start?
I believe I counted 4, so we should be able to start.
Okay, give me one moment. All right. Welcome, everyone. The January 14, 2021 meeting of the Zoning Committee of the St. Paul Planning Commission will now come to order. The chair of the Planning Commission has previously determined that it is not practical or prudent for the Planning Commission and its committees to meet in person pursuant to Minnesota Statute Section 13D.02. Considering the COVID-19 health pandemic, it is not feasible for any member of the Zoning Committee to be present at our regular location. Committee members attending this meeting are doing so by telephone or other electronic means. It is also not feasible for members of the public to attend the meeting at its regular location due to the health pandemic and emergency. Arrangements have been made so that applicants and members of the public may also attend this meeting by telephone or other electronic means. Accordingly, no meeting is being held in City Hall, Council Chambers at 15 West Kellogg Boulevard at this time. Again, this public meeting is being conducted remotely due to the COVID-19 pandemic. This meeting is also being recorded. Even though this hearing is being conducted remotely, the committee's public hearing rules and procedures still apply as if the committee were meeting in its usual place. These rules and procedures are as follows. The zoning committee's recommendations and findings must have a rational basis based upon the St. Paul zoning code and applicable state and federal laws. The zoning committee's actions today are recommendations. They are not final decisions. The committee's recommendations are forwarded to the Planning Commission for final action. The committee's recommendations will be considered by the full Planning Commission at its regular meeting held 1 week from Friday. The Planning Commission's meeting is open to the public, but it is not a public hearing. The decisions of the Planning Commissions on conditional use permits, non-conforming use permits, site plans, variances, and other zoning permits are final decisions unless appealed to the City Council. The decisions of the Planning Commission on rezoning applications are only recommendations. By state law, the City Council, following a public hearing before it, makes the final decision on rezoning applications. I just want to move on to the, can we also just make sure that everybody's mute? Because I think I'm hearing an echo. The following rules and procedures governing today's public hearing of the Zoning Committee is first that the chair will call the secretary to take attendance by the committee. Committee members will need to respond verbally for the record. For committee members during the meeting, please mute your microphones except when recognized by the chair to speak. Discussion is intended for committee members and staff only, except during public hearing items when the chair invites individuals to speak. Staff will be monitoring microphones and muting committee members and members of the public as needed. Use the Teams chat function only to indicate that you have a question or comment. The chat function is part of the official meeting record. Type Q or question into the chat feature when you have a question and or C or comment if you have a comment. The chair and staff will monitor the chat function so that the chair may recognize committee members and staff in an orderly way. After being recognized by the chair, committee members should state their name before speaking. This helps others in the meeting and assists with official recording. When the chair calls the committee to vote on agenda items, the secretary will be called to do a roll call. Committee members must respond verbally for the record and vote either yes or no. Cases will be called in the order they appear on the agenda, and the chair reserves the right to limit the length of testimony if deemed necessary. I'll ask the recording secretary to now conduct a roll call of the committee members that are present for this meeting. Each committee member should acknowledge their presence by saying here. Samantha.
Chair Baker.
Here.
Commissioner DeJoy. Commissioner Edgerton.
Here.
Commissioner Grill,
Here.
Commissioner Hood,
Here.
Commissioner Lindeke, Commissioner Rangel Morales, and Commissioner Said.
Here.
5 in attendance.
Thank you. If you are a member of the public that would like to speak during a specific item's public hearing, you will be asked to identify yourself at the appropriate time. After I read the item number and title, staff will give an oral report on the item, and then I will open up the floor for committee members to ask questions of staff. After that, I will open the public hearing on the item. All testimony and questions will be addressed to the chair. You may speak in favor or in opposition, and you will be limited to no more than 2 minutes. People who exceed the time limit may have their microphones muted by staff. I will first ask for testimony from those in favor and then from those in opposition. You must provide your name and number for the public record. Please mute yourself during this meeting, except during your 2 minutes when you are specifically called upon to speak. You are allowed to speak only once, with the exception of the applicant, who will be allowed an opportunity to respond to the testimony and answer committee questions. I wanted to just highlight before we move into our first case that we have the upcoming site plan review meeting has been canceled, so there are no items for that meeting, and our upcoming scheduled zoning committee meeting has also been canceled. We don't have any items there. So with that, without further ado, I know that was a little lengthy. We'll move on to our first item of old business. It is 1346 Arcade Street LLC. It's a change and expansion of non-conforming use to add auto repair and outdoor auto sales to existing auto body shop and dwelling, and then there are variances to parking. I would like to call up Mr. Dermody to present this application.
Thank you, Chair Baker, committee members, Bill Dermody, staff for PED. This is an application that is similar to one many of you will remember from about 8-9 months ago, came before the zoning committee. It is also a very complicated application, and in my presentation, I am not going to go into all of the details. It's honestly overwhelming, even for me, and I wrote the staff report. So I'm going to take a broad brush approach in my presentation here and just ask that you follow up with any questions or requests for more information on anything I'm not going into great detail on. First, I'll start with the surrounding area. Can you see the screen with the map up?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. So the subject site is at the corner of Arcade and Clear, across the street from Johnson High School. It includes a single-family home on the front part of the southern parcel with a garage attachment behind it. The rest of the business is on the northern parcel here. It's been an automotive business for quite some time. And I'll go into the application here, but they essentially want to expand what's going on at this business, and it would continue to be an auto-oriented business. I will bring out the site plan while I go through some of the details here. So in 1941, a gas station was approved on the site, so it's been an auto-oriented use for that long. In the 1980s, there was some more action on this site. There was an auto body shop, just as there's an auto body shop there today. The auto body shop applied for a number of things, including what was then a spray booth addition on the north side of the building, now proposed by the current applicant as a mechanic auto body detailing area. This addition was constructed without permits and was ordered to be removed back in the 1980s. And there was a number of meetings about that, including an appeal to City Council. In 1992, Planning Commission approved an expansion of non-conforming use permit to increase what's happening on this property and to allow some storage in the area behind the single-family home, subject to a number of conditions. And again, the spray booth was to be removed, and then this area behind the home was limited in its activities. It could not do auto body repair. It could only be storage of classic cars. Then in March, we had a very similar application to the current application. Now I'll go into what's being applied for here, but the main changes from that earlier application are that the former spray area has a different use associated with it. It was, I think, wide open to all of the uses in the earlier application. And then this storage area in the back, the uses that are being requested back there are different than the ones that were requested back in March or so. Also, there was, as far as the parking spaces, the one change in the parking spaces is that there's a parking space behind the buildings, and that is intended for the residents, the single-family residents up here. So those are the changes. Now, to get into exactly what they are applying for with this application, and again, I'll note that a few months ago the application was for a change in non-conforming use was approved. Most of the variances were denied, and the approval on the change in non-conforming use was had a number of conditions associated with it. They're very similar to the ones recommended by staff today, and the first 4 of them are and were objectionable to the applicant, and that's why they haven't commenced this new business that they had applied for, and why they are back today to make a slightly different pitch to you and look for the Planning Commission approval. So the application requests a change and expansion of non-conforming use at both these addresses to add auto repair and outdoor auto sales to the existing auto body shop and dwelling. They also request a number of variances, including the distance from the Arcade Clear intersection, which is a minimum of 60 feet. We have 2 curb cuts that violate that minimum 60-foot distance. Required parking variance is requested. There are 8 parking spots for customers and employees on the site plan, but there are 24 parking spaces required. And the landscaping associated with the parking is not provided, and they ask for a variance for that. There's supposed to be 4 feet along these front property lines adjacent to the sidewalk to allow for landscaping, and that's not provided. They'd like to just not provide that due to the impact it would have on their site plan. There are many findings, fairly long staff report. Many of staff's analyses of these findings are that they could be met if basically not so much was being asked for on this site. The totality of the activity and the expansion and the space being dedicated to it is creating many problems that are attempted to be resolved through the variances. And so that's, that general response you'll see in many of the findings in staff's analysis of the findings under the change and expansion of non-conforming use, that this could be met if there were conditions that limited the scope and scale of the activity on this site. With regard to the variances, which I'd like to get into a little more detail about, one of the findings is that required findings for the variances is that they are in harmony with the general purposes and intent of the zoning code. And in staff's finding, In staff's analysis, this finding is not met for any of the variances. The zoning code, for a number of reasons, including that zoning code's purpose is partially to lessen congestion in the public streets by providing for off-street parking. The purpose of the 60-foot distance from the intersection is for providing for safety of pedestrians, bicyclists, and vehicular traffic near the intersection where these uses most often interact, especially across the street from a high school. And the purpose of the landscaping and dimensional standards with regard to surface parking are intended to do a number of things, including environmental benefits and pedestrian comfort benefits in this general vicinity. So that's one finding. Does this meet the general purposes and intent of the zoning code? And staff's saying no to that. Another finding is whether the variance is consistent with the comprehensive plan. Notably, we have a new comprehensive plan in place. We've gone from the 2030 comprehensive plan to now officially the 2040 comprehensive plan. And I believe we cited both just for your reference last time, but now the 2040 plan is official. It includes a few relevant policies, including reducing the amount of land dedicated to off-street parking. Also, it calls for minimizing and consolidating curb cuts as opportunities arise for sites like this. And although this is not a redevelopment, it is an intensification of development on the site, and it does present an opportunity to eliminate curb cuts and become more compliant with that policy direction. A third finding that applies to variances is that there have to be practical difficulties in complying with the zoning code, and economic considerations alone do not constitute practical difficulties. And staff is saying that this finding is not met for any of the variances either. The garage addition behind the house was designed and used for parking antique cars, and it would be reasonable to expect that similar use back there would continue. The spray booth addition on the north side of the building was never legal. And with, some rearrangement of spaces and a reduction in the number of for sale spaces on the outside and elimination of that spray booth, we actually believe that there is not a practical difficulty with this site per se once those problems are eliminated. And you could create a functional drive aisle that goes around the building and is legal and has properly dimensioned spaces and enough space for landscaping. And that's related to the other finding I wanted to highlight with regard to variances. The plight of the landowner cannot be due to circumstances that are not unique to the property or are created by the landowner. And this is essentially a series of self-created problems because of how they're trying to intensify the property. If that spray booth were to go away, and if the inside were used as it's in a similar intensity to how it's been used for many decades, even adding the uses but just not adding the space, you could have a functional site and a functional site plan that did not need all of these variances. So. Even though I've gone into less than half of the findings, I do feel like I've talked for long enough on this. So I'll cut to the final part here. We have a recommendation of approval from the district council. They just contacted me to mention their earlier recommendation from months ago is still valid. They haven't changed their mind on that. It's subject to a few conditions that are taken into account in the staff report. And the staff's recommendation then is for denial of the variances and for approval of the change and expansion of non-conforming use to add auto repair and outdoor auto sales subject to conditions, 8 conditions, including, and I'll list the 4 that are objectionable to the applicant. Number 1, the garage addition behind the house at 1334 shall not be used for auto body or auto repair shop work and must include at least one parking space to meet the requirement for the house. They do agree with that second part, just not the first part. Number 2, the spray booth addition on the north side of the building shall be removed. Number 3, the Clear Avenue curb cuts within 60 feet of the Arcade Clear intersection shall be removed and replaced with curbing. And number 4, off-street parking on the site shall meet dimensional and design standards in the zoning code to the greatest extent possible, including the perimeter and screening landscape requirements in the zoning code. With that, Chair, I'll turn it back to you for any questions.
Thanks, Mr. Dermody. All right. Can I just say that can we make sure you mute your phones or computers if you are not speaking at this time? All right. Thanks for that. I would like to first open it up to my colleagues, any zoning committee members that have questions for Mr. Dermody. All right, I see Commissioner Grill.
This is Commissioner Grill. Mr. Dermody, I remember seeing this earlier the last time around, and I trying to work through our decision-making process the last time versus our decision-making process this time. And I think last time we came up with a variety of conditions. And how did those change from the first time we saw this to the second time? I guess that's sort of what I'm stuck on, was trying to compare the two reports and pick out what was different.
So I believe the conditions are either exactly the same or very close to exactly the same. I will double check here to make sure there are not any small differences and let you know in a few minutes, but it's very close.
Mr. Dermody, Commissioner Grill actually pretty much answered the question that I had, and I guess to go a little bit deeper is, has there been conversations with the applicant around some of the concerns on why staff made the recommendation, not in this staff report, but in an earlier staff report? And I'm just interested on if we're looking at pretty much the same staff report, in addition to what has changed, but have they been talked to around the specific findings that you felt like weren't met, and any conversation or discussion about those?
Yes, Chair Baker, we have had conversations, the applicant and I think, he can expound on this, but I think his general feeling is he was not able to make the pitch he wanted to make last time around, and really wanted another opportunity to talk to you and make a clearer pitch for why he needs what he needs on this site. Okay. And then also to just go back a bit, and I double checked while you were talking there, the only change between what the Planning Commission approved last time and what's recommended here is the number 7 is eliminated in condition number 5. It now just says the parking spaces, and before it called out the number 7, the 7 parking spaces. We happen to have 8 at this time, so that one's a little bit different, but the other 7 conditions are all the same as you had approved months ago.
Thanks, Mr. Dermody. Committee members, any other questions for Mr. Dermody before we call up the applicant? I see a question from Commissioner Edgerton.
Thank you, Chair Baker. Mr. Dermody, I'm just wondering, and I was looking in here and I couldn't find it. The spray booth, why is it a condition that the spray booth shall be removed? Is it related to parking, or is there something more than that?
Chair Baker, Commissioner, Committee Member Edgerton, the spray booth is referred to in several of the findings, and it has to do with the curb cuts, because if the curb cuts are closed, you need a way to get in and out on the clear side, which is either a new curb cut farther east or more logically off the alley. And if that's your curb cut back there that you use, you need to have a functional width driveway, and removing that spray booth allows for that proper width driveway through that space.
Following up then. So it's not really an issue so much of the spray booth as a recommended solution to the curb cut is to remove the spray booth. Is that correct?
The chair, commissioner, the use inside the spray booth is not a problem. I would say that secondarily, the amount of activity that's proposed is a problem, and this is part of that activity, which is causing the higher parking demand and all of that. So in a secondary way, that's a problem too, but mainly it's about how this outdoor layout functions and drive aisles and parking spaces and all of that.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Dermody? Okay, thanks, Mr. Dermody. We need to call you back up. Well, before you leave, I do see something from Commissioner Hood.
Mr. Dermody, question on the spray paint booth. So if I recall correctly, that was built illegally in '92 and essentially went unrecognized by the city or county for 28 years prior to this application. Is that right? So it was built and we just didn't know that it was there, and we proceeded with life as it was with that there, with just no knowledge of it. Is that correct?
Chair, Commissioner, that's not exactly correct. The spray booth addition was constructed in 1985. It was caught in 1985. They appealed to the city council, were denied an appeal. This is a previous, owner of the business. And then in 1992, when they applied for something different, it was recognized by the planning commission and staff at that time as being illegal, and still, there was still a need to take it out. I don't know that there's, I don't recall offhand whether there were any citations, but there was no planning commission action since 1992 that called attention to it. There may have been some citations from DSI. I'd have to check that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from Mr. Dermody? All right. Thanks, Mr. Dermody. We will now move in to call for the applicant at this time if they to make any comments and add into what Mr. Dermody has said. Could you please state your name and spell it for the record and your phone number? First of all, is the applicant with us? Again, is the applicant with us? Mr. Dermody, do you know if the applicant is connected? I want to make sure I'm not missing him or her.
I don't know if Charles Belcher is on the line or not.
I see, yes. He says I'm here. Are you able, if you're speaking, we can't hear you, but this is your opportunity. Does he need to be unmuted? Is the last name Belcher? Pronounced Belcher?
That's
I
right.
believe he's showing as unmuted.
Okay. Well, Mr. Belcher, if you could, we'll try to work on it on our side. We want to make sure we give you the opportunity to speak to the committee.
Chair, I know from other meetings that sometimes it's helpful if somebody's been muted, sometimes they have problems unmuting themselves.
Okay.
Charles, if you can hear us, I might suggest leaving the meeting and then coming right back in. That often works to get your microphone working again.
Thanks, Mr. Warner. I'll make sure I highlight that if he just left the meeting. We'll give it a few moments as he enters back into the meeting. I feel like I need to play some Jeopardy music right now. All right, I think he's entering now. Mr. Belcher, are you able to hear us, and can you speak so we can hear you? If you are saying something, and I think you are unmuted, but yeah, you're correct. We cannot hear you. You can call in. That is correct. I want to make sure that we provide you this opportunity since this application is coming back before us again. So please call in. Again, we'll give it about another minute, and then we may need to, and I guess, Mr. Warner, I'll defer to you on how do we potentially come back to this item if need be.
Well, Chair, let's wait and see if he can call in. It looks like he's got a number up here.
Okay.
If not, since we know he's here, we could always go on to another matter and then come back and revisit this one.
He says at the moment he's calling in.
Okay, I just let Charles in, so because I recognize the phone number. Mr. Belcher, are you there now?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, great. Great, Mr. Belcher. I apologize for all the technical difficulty that we experienced, but could you please state your name, spell it for the record, and also your address?
Okay, so my name is Charles, and the last name is Belcher, Belcher, and the address is 1069 Argyle Street, St. Paul, Minnesota 55103.
Mr. Belcher, would you mind muting if you do have a computer or anybody else that's not, everyone else that's not speaking, please mute yourself, okay. And I'll go ahead and give you the 2 minutes.
Okay, great. I'll do an opening statement and then would like to answer some questions and then maybe reply to some of the things that Bill had talked about. So my name is Charles Belcher, and I'm the property owner and business owner of 1346 Arcade. And the reason why I'm reapplying is I was not able to prepare myself for the response adequately from the previous staff report. And that took place online, and I didn't know how that works. So this time I know how it works a little bit better. I now have a better idea and have had a chance to respond in writing to the new current staff report and have submitted that in my application. Hopefully the committee members have had a chance to review it and become a little bit more familiar with the layout of the property. If the variances were granted with some conditions, in the future, we would be able to utilize the new licenses and believe that it would be a better image and curb appeal for the property and for the neighborhood. Having attractive vehicles in our parking lot would be better than all auto body, for example. If we are not able to modify the conditions, we would not be able to add the new licenses, allowing us to evolve into a more suitable future business. So as it can get a little confusing trying to understand everything, but hopefully I've made it understandable. And so the conclusion is I'm asking for the committee to approve the current / new site plan dated on 12/22/2020 that was in the application, and to amend some of the conditions in the staff report. The current site plan on file with the City of St. Paul Licensing and Zoning Department has already been approved over a year ago with the current license, which addresses, for example, the landscaping variance as it is an existing non-conforming business. So that was kind of my opening statement, and I would like to answer any questions that you may have and talk in more detail about some of the conditions.
Thanks, Mr. Belcher. I open it up to my colleagues. Any questions or comments from Mr. Belcher? Mr. Belcher, I did have a question for you. In the staff's report, in their findings and recommendations, you highlighted it, I guess, in your statement, but there are a few things that they're requesting as additional conditions for there to be approval. And it is two that I'd like to talk to you about. One is the removal of the spray booth addition. I'm just interested right now, and I understand the rationale of why that needs to go away. But my question to you is, what is your concern about that being moved or going away? And what kind of conversations you've had with staff about that?
Well, I haven't had many conversations with staff about that really at all. Just telling him that it's not used for a paint booth. When I bought this property over a year ago, it was never a paint booth, and it's hasn't been used as a paint booth since 30 years ago. And it's just a regular bay. And that bay is actually very important to our business because that bay is separated from the rest of the bays where we do body work. And when you do body work, there's dust flying around and things like that. This bay is currently being used more for cleaning the cars and getting them ready back to the customer. And by eliminating that bay, if you look at the diagram, by eliminating that bay and using the curb cut that's in front of it as an entrance, as staff report wants us to do, we would also lose the 4 parking spots to the west side of that bay that you see. So we're already fighting for as many parking spots as we can get on the property. So I just don't understand why we would want to remove that and lose 4 more parking spots. And in some of the material that I put in the application, and hopefully you guys were able to review that, if we were to put the curb cut, the entrance to the clear side where staff report is asking us to do, we have big tow trucks that come into our property, and we have snap-on trucks and tool trucks that sometimes come. There's no way that these larger trucks would be able to maneuver out. We like how our layout is currently set up, where we have the entrance. We only have one entrance to our property that's within the 60 feet variance that we're asking for. The entrance on the arcade side is more than 60 feet, so we're fine there. But for some reason, a car lot calls for not having an entrance less than 60 feet, where a body shop doesn't require that, a mechanic shop doesn't require that. I'm not sure why a used car sales requires that. So that's why we're asking the variance to keep that current curb cut that we have. It works very well. Cars can come in and out very easily. By moving that, we would lose 4 parking spots. We would lose a bay that's very important to us. And it doesn't make sense because vehicles would not be able to maneuver inside of our lot. And we don't, as I addressed in the material that I gave you guys, is that we don't want tow trucks in the street dropping off cars. We want them to be on our property doing that. So having that entrance there is very important and crucial.
Thanks, Mr. Belcher.
Yes.
Any questions or comments from my colleagues? from Mr. Belcher. I think I see there's a question from Commissioner Edgerton.
Thank you, Chair Baker. Yeah, this is a question for, I'd like a little clarification. I see in Mr. Belcher, in your response, you address the conditions that you have issue with, the first four, but you really don't address in there the staff recommendation that at the top, that staff recommends denial of the variances of required parking and landscaping and minimum distance. Are you also stating that you take issue, or you have a problem with the denial of the parking variance and the other ones as well? Because you didn't really, I guess I didn't see that you stated that. I saw that you addressed the conditions, but not the overall recommendation. So potentially, I mean, we could see a recommendation of denial of those variances and an approval of the change and expansion of the non-conforming use, and take away those four conditions. Would that be acceptable, or do you have an issue directly with the denial of the variances? You understand what my question is?
Not really, because if you were to take away the four conditions, then wouldn't it be approved? I guess I'm not quite understanding. And
so essentially, those are the. But staff is recommending denial of the variances, and that's a problem in and of itself. You're looking for approval of the variances and removal of the four conditions. Is that correct?
That's correct. But with the four conditions, condition 2 to be removed, condition 3 to be removed, because those two conditions have to do with the removal of the bay and the changing of the curb cut. That's 2 and 3. The condition 1, I've kind of negotiated with, I'm not going to get everything that I want type of mentality, is that we're not going to be able to do, auto body or auto repair in that garage. That's part of the business in the back, but we already are approved to use it for our business to store cars. So that's fine. We would just ask that we would be able to clean a car in there if we want inside of the garage. Not do any kind of body work or mechanic, but to be able to detail a car, just the inside of the car. So I think I spelled that out in the paperwork that I sent you guys. So that would be number 1, removal of number 2 and removal of number 3. And then condition 4 has to do with the landscaping. There's no room to put landscaping in the front of the business, because if we were to put landscaping in the front, then we would lose all those 4 parking spots in the front of the business as well. And I just would like to reiterate that some of these rules only apply to like one of the licenses, where the other licenses don't require that. So for example, auto body or mechanic, the auto body license or the mechanic license doesn't require it for me to change the curb cut. It's only the auto sales that does. And when it comes to the landscaping, auto body or sales doesn't require that. Only mechanic requires that. So that's where it gets a little confusing.
Thanks,
And
Commissioner.
And then I do believe the first time I did my application, the committee had approved the variance for the parking.
All right. Any other questions from Mr. Belcher? Well, Mr. Belcher, thank you so much. We appreciate you providing your statements and answering questions from the committee. Now I will. I think we have to open up the public hearing portion of it. Is there anyone here to speak in favor of the application? Is there anyone here to speak in favor of the application? Last time, is there anyone here to speak in favor of the application? I see a hand. Oh, I think it's a staff member. If there's no one here to speak in favor of the application, is there anyone here to speak in opposition of this application? Is there anyone here to speak in opposition of this application? And last time, is there anyone here to speak in opposition of this application? Hearing none, I'm now closing the public hearing portion for this application, and I will move to discussion or a motion from the zoning committee members. All right. I'd like to call back up Mr. Dermody. I had a question. So, in talking and hearing from the applicant, specifically, I'm interested right now, specifically on 1, 2, 3, and 4, and I'll kind of go in order. I'm interested in your perspective on this. Number 2 and 3, given what the applicant is saying, what he needs, and what will support that business. For the spray booth to be removed. In other words, he's asking, he would like for it to stay there, and then the Clear Avenue curb cut. So to me, those are somewhat tied. And then for number 1, it seems like he is comfortable, and to me, I feel like we can't say no to detailing of a business, so cleaning in there, but I'm interested on your perspective first on those 3.
Thank you, Chair Baker. For numbers 2, 3, and 4, are those the ones you're asking about?
I first started with just 2 and 3 kind of were together, and then number 1. So 1, 2, and 3.
Okay,
first.
1, 2, and 3. Sure. Well, the recommendation is what the recommendation is there.
Mm-hmm.
Number 1 is the one where we're the closest to being in agreement on. The cleaning. Basically, the one thing that Charles wants in addition is to be able to clean cars in that area behind the house. That is still a business activity, but a less intense one and less likely to generate parking. So that's at least close to being supportable, even with the interpretation of findings that staff has. So number 1 is very close. Number 2 and 3, those are significant. If the spray booth addition is kept and the curb cuts are kept, we would need significantly different findings than what's presented in the staff report to be able to do that. It would necessitate, it'd be related to the variances. It would necessitate what the applicant is talking about, where the landscaping is not provided because you no longer have the space to do a significant rearrangement of how your parking is laid out.
Mm-hmm.
You're kind of limited to something very similar to what Charles has laid out, with the possible exceptions of you could change how the spaces are designated, maybe reduce the number that have for sale vehicles in them and that sort of thing. But it's difficult to keep all number 2 and number 3 to delete those conditions and get landscaping in, for instance. So I guess that's my perspective. And if the zoning committee were to move in that direction, this is a complicated enough set of findings that I would not personally feel comfortable changing them on the fly, because we've got about a dozen things that would need to change. So I might suggest to the committee, if you're inclined to go that direction, that you give some thoughts to staff and that you consider laying over the item for a couple of weeks so that I can attempt to put your thoughts into writing.
No, thank you for that information, Mr. Dermody. I appreciate your perspective on that. All right. Any other questions or comments from commissioners? I want to make sure that I have this right. I don't, is it Dita? I know Yaya. Staff member, are you, okay. How do you pronounce your, I'm sorry, how do you pronounce your last name?
Diata.
Diata, I apologize about that.
Chair, members of the committee here, I'm not sure this is the right time for me to chime in, but I was curious because in listening to the applicant, it sounds like they already got an application for a site plan that was already approved. And I'm a little curious to know how a site plan can be approved when there are variances pending.
Mr. Dermody, do you have any insight into that?
No, and the public hearing has been closed, but the applicant would be the best person to ask about that. The one thing I can tell you is there has been no official site plan application. There may have been something associated with their pending certificate of occupancy, perhaps, or maybe an informal approval. Nothing that I'm aware of, though. That would be an approval of the site plan. So I guess that's the question for the applicant.
Thank you, Mr. Diata and Mr. Dermody. I'd like to open up to my colleagues for any other discussion or a motion. Commissioner Grill.
This is Commissioner Grill. So I think in previous conversations, if I remember our last discussion, folks were uncomfortable with numbers 2 and 3, members of the committee. And I think that was partially due to the fact that removing that spray booth addition was going to be something costly and a major change to the building that the applicant purchased. And I'm still struggling with 2 and 3 because it does seem to be quite the change. And so I'm hesitant to support the staff recommendation as it is now. I understand Mr. Dermody is going by the letter of the law here. So I understand sort of the conflict that we're facing as a committee. I know Mr. Hood left, but he also had some reservations around some of the conditions. And I guess I'm not making a motion right now, but I'm leaning towards laying it over. If staff could come up with a recommendation that sort of takes into some of the concerns of the committee, or if that's possible, because we are going to need different language, and I don't think any of us would be able to come up with it on the fly to change 2 and 3 in a way that Mr. Warner and Mr. Dermody would be comfortable with.
Thank you for that, Commissioner Grill. I too am struggling a little bit. I completely appreciate that Mr. Dermody is dealing with the complexity of this item. I'm seeing this item again. But my concern actually is with 2 and 3, and looking at if there is an opportunity for greater flexibility or a change for it not to be removed. And hearing what Mr. Dermody said, I guess my question for Mr. Dermody is, if we were to lay this over and staff and commissioners were to give you insight into what would be helpful for staff to come up with some language, how does that affect the timeline of this application?
Well, technically, Chair, under state law, we can extend the deadline for action. It's to January 31st right now, but we can extend it for 60 days. So you have time under state law to do it. So it is potentially just a 2-week delay, and one that is lawful delay if you wanted to do that. Thank
you. I see Commissioner Edgerton.
Thank you, Chair Baker. Yeah, I would be. I'm in a similar. I have a similar position as Commissioner Grill and Commissioner Hood. A question I would have for Mr. Dermody is, if condition 3 were removed, does condition 2, I mean, the spray booth, is that is that still an issue then? It seems as though those are linked somewhat. That part of the reason the spray booth would be an issue is because if we remove the one curb cut, and I'm wondering if we can not move the curb cut, if spray booth is even an issue. And in terms of a rationale, then it would be existing. I don't know if you call it an existing non-conforming condition, but existing condition, maintaining it. Are we in any way making something, if not better, not worse? And would that be a rationale for accepting, for not requiring the curb cut?
Dermody?
Chair Baker, Commissioner Edgerton. I think if you're dedicated to keeping the curb cuts, the spray booth addition is less of an issue. It's still a little bit of an issue, as I mentioned, just the overall intensity of the site. But it's no longer needed to provide that drive idle, so it's certainly less of an issue. As far as it being an existing condition, I'm not sure about that. I would want to give that some thought. I'd be concerned about the logic there and the precedent, honestly, of something being illegal. It was always illegal. It's not grandfathered. It's always been illegal, and accepting it because it's been there illegally for a long time. There may be some logic to that, but I'm not sure. I want more time to think about that and maybe confer with Mr. Warner.
Thanks, Mr. Dermody. I'm going to say another 2 to 3 minutes on this item, and then we'll move forward with the vote. I see Commissioner Said and then Commissioner Grill.
Thanks, Chair. This is Commissioner Said. Yes, I agree with Commissioner Grill that we need a better understanding and stuff for recommendation. I confuse either 2 and 3 for the yeah. We just need a better recommendation for the staff.
Thanks, Commissioner Said. Commissioner Grill.
I'm curious here because Mr. Dermody makes a good point about precedent with the illegal, I guess not non-conforming use, the illegal addition. Is it possible, if we were to lay it over, that along with maybe an amended recommendation from Mr. Dermody, we could get something from Mr. Warner on just the legal implications of what we're looking at? I apologize for not doing this in advance of the meeting today. I think all of us were struggling with getting through this particular recommendation and needed the discussion in the verbal staff report. But I do think trying to get our arms around the legal ramifications of allowing this, because obviously we don't want to set a precedent that the city then has to be able to defend.
I completely agree. Commissioners, I see Commissioner Rangel Morales as our last one, and then we'll move in for the vote. Commissioner Rangel Morales?
I was under the impression that we didn't create precedent with these things, that we took each one by the conditions and the circumstances of each individual application. Is that incorrect, Mr. Dermody?
Chair, Commissioner Rona Morales, we do look at the specifics of the case, but certain parts of it could be precedent. I'm seeing Mr. Warner's hand up. He's probably got thoughts on this, but it's not the entire case I'm thinking of as precedent. It's just the idea that an illegal addition is okay because they've gotten away with it for a certain amount of time.
Rounding us out, Mr. Warner.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Commissioners. I think Mr. Dermody raises a pretty important point, and so if the desire of the committee is to lay the matter over for Mr. Dermody to look at findings or alternate findings. We'll have to look at that, what those are, and then advise you on what the implications of those choices might be.
Okay, so what I'm hearing now is it sounds like I've heard from the majority of commissioners that we feel that this item should be laid over to the next zoning committee meeting. During that time frame, Mr. Dermody, along with other staff members, will work with potential alternative language. There's some concern around finding additional conditional finding 2 and 3, but also around just precedent setting, and that's something exactly what Mr. Warner said. So is it an opportunity, or I guess the request is for staff to come back with language that would allow us to, first of all, have your perspective or your recommendation on the conversation around precedent setting with this specifically with the, what is it called? The spray booth, which means that we're saying that it would stay there, it wouldn't be removed. Does that make sense to staff? Do you feel like you need more information or more guidance?
No, that makes sense to me, and I'd be glad to work with Mr. Warner, Mr. Torstenson, anybody else to get you something more informative for a couple of weeks from now if you wanted to lay it over.
Okay, I see, and I will close the window after these two commissioners, Commissioner Grill and then Commissioner Edgerton.
This is Commissioner Grill. I would make a motion to lay over the matter for 2 weeks to allow staff additional time to review the findings and do research on precedent.
And this is Commissioner Edgerton. I would second that.
I have a motion and a second. I guess we'll move forward with the vote.
Commissioner Edgerton,
Yes.
Commissioner Grill,
Yes.
Commissioner Lindeke, Commissioner Rangel Morales,
Yes. Yes.
Commissioner Said,
Yes.
and Chair Baker.
Yes. All right. That vote moving forward, I also see that I think Commissioner Lindeke said yes, knowing that he was here. So there's an agreement and voted on that matter will be will lay over till the next zoning committee meeting, and with that, staff will come with alternative language and guidance off of precedent setting with that second item within the recommendation. All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Dermody and applicant. We appreciate that. We'll move forward within our agenda. Next is new business, 2069 Marshall Avenue. It's a rezoning from T2 traditional neighborhood to T3 traditional neighborhood. And to present the staff report is Ms. Dadlis. Welcome, Ms. Dadlis.
Thank you and good afternoon. My name is Katie Dadlis. I'm a planner and also the planner assigned to the Union Park neighborhood. Please let me know you can hear me.
We can hear you. Yes, thank you.
So I will go ahead and share my screen. Someone could let me know that they can see my screen. That would be helpful as well.
I cannot see your screen yet.
I cannot see your screen.
Let's see. Let's go with this. Can you see now?
We can.
Okay, terrific. So I just want to show the aerial of the area just to orient people to the site. So the property in question to be proposed for rezoning is 269 Marshall Avenue, located on the north side of the street here. This is Marshall Avenue and this is Cleveland here. It's an existing duplex next to, I believe, a single family home and some lower density, probably single family homes to the west. Across the street to the east is a gas station and convenience store. There's an apartment building here. More commercial to the east. To the south and east is a mixed use building and more commercial uses. And to the south is an apartment building and then some lower density residential. Take a quick look at the zoning map existing. The property in question right here is in a T2 zoning district. The property immediately to the east is existing T3 zone. There's the gas station and convenience store, zone B3. Property to the east is T2, T3 kitty corner, and T1 zoning for the apartment building across the street on the south side, and some of those houses that are there. And the intent here is that the applicant would rezone this property to T3 and then combine it with the property on the corner already zoned T3 in order to do the development. I do have a few photographs of the area that I can show. Property in the center here is the property at 269, and the property to the right is 263 Marshall Avenue, and you can see the gas station across the street in the corner. These properties here are to the west of 269. You can see that along Marshall Avenue. This is the property to the east at the northeast corner. Property kitty corner at the southeast corner at Marshall and Cleveland. Directly south of the subject property, again, that apartment building, and then some residential uses to the west along Marshall Avenue. And then finally, this is some single family homes that are just north of the property, north of the alley, and that are on Eigelhart Street. Okay. So the request before you today, again, is a rezoning of the property from T2 traditional to T3. And as I said, the applicant's intent is to combine the properties in order to do a mixed-use development with commercial space at the corner at Cleveland and Marshall, and then apartment units above. The number of stories for the apartment building and the number of units and the type of parking hasn't been finalized yet. Though vehicle access to the building would be off of Cleveland Avenue here, you can see with the site plan, and this is a eastern elevation which would show vehicle access here, and the alley would be approximately in that location. Some planning commissioners may recall that many of the properties along Marshall Avenue were rezoned in 2018 as part of the West Marshall Avenue zoning study. The property at 2069 was rezoned from R3 single family to T2 traditional neighborhood, and the property immediately to the east was rezoned from R3 to T3. This was done to support citywide goals of increasing density and land use diversity at neighborhood nodes and focusing investment along transit corridors to support ridership. There are several findings that must be met in order for staff to recommend approval of the rezoning. The first is that the proposed zoning is consistent with the way the area is developed, and staff finds this finding to be met. The Marshall-Cleveland intersection is a neighborhood node in a mixed-use area. The intent of the T3 zone is to provide for higher density pedestrian and transit-oriented mixed-use development. The intent of the zoning code is to encourage a compatible mix of land uses at densities that support transit and that reflect the scale, character, and urban design of St. Paul's traditional neighborhoods. Both Cleveland and Marshall Avenues are existing transit corridors, and plans are underway to develop a bus rapid transit route along Marshall Avenue. The second finding that is that the proposed zoning is consistent with the comprehensive plan, and this finding is met. Generally, citywide land use goals are to increase density and land use diversity at neighborhood nodes, focus investment along transit corridors, and promote high quality urban design. Specific land use and housing policies are detailed in the staff report, but generally these comprehensive plan policies encourage transit supportive density and directing the majority of growth to areas with the highest existing and planned transit capacity, focusing growth at neighborhood nodes, supporting development of new housing, particularly in areas identified as mixed use, urban neighborhoods and in areas with the highest existing or planned transit service to meet market demand for living in walkable, transit accessible urban neighborhoods. Policies in the Union Park Community Plan include supporting land uses that preserve Union Park as a connected, walkable, mixed-use, sustainable neighborhood with a pedestrian-oriented, human-scale streetscape, and exploring opportunities to increase density levels and promote new development along key corridors that support transit-oriented development, and supporting multi-unit mixed-use development in mixed-use corridors that can accommodate higher density levels while minimizing impacts on adjacent lower density areas, and discourage multi-unit housing and retail uses that are incompatible with single-family residential areas. The third finding is that the proposed zoning is compatible with the surrounding area, and this finding is met. The proposed T3 zoning is compatible with medium density residential uses and commercial uses at or near the Marshall-Cleveland intersection. The property along Marshall was rezoned in 2018 to allow for increased residential densities and mixed-use development, particularly at neighborhood nodes. And the fourth finding is that the proposed zoning will not result in spot zoning, and this finding is met. The property is adjacent to an existing T3 zoning district at the Marshall-Cleveland intersection. And based on these findings, staff recommends approval of the request to rezone the property at 2069 Marshall Avenue from T2 traditional neighborhood to T3 traditional neighborhood. Before I complete my remarks, I just want to add that the Union Park Community Council submitted a request to lay the item over to give its Transportation Committee and its Committee on Land Use and Economic Development time to discuss and provide a recommendation to the full board, and then for the board to take action prior to the Zoning Committee making its recommendation. And that is all I have at this time, and I would be happy to take any questions that you have.
Thanks, Ms. Dallas. Just to clarify, from the Union Park, from the District Council, their request is for the Zoning Committee to lay this over?
Correct.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure. I'll open it up to my colleagues. Are there any questions for Ms. Dallas before we open it up to the applicant? All right, doesn't sound like we have any at this time. We may be calling you back, Ms. Dallas. I just want to make sure that we have the applicant with us at this time. Are you here?
Yes, Chair Baker, this is David Kvasnik. I'm with Rob Page, and I'll be speaking to this.
Thanks, Mr. Kvasnik. Could you state your name and address for the record, and we'll turn it over to you to add anything.
Yeah, my name is David Kvasnik, and my address is 2012 Selby Avenue.
Thank you, and is there anything that you would like to add at this time?
Yes, there is, sir. Chair Baker and fellow commissioners, my name is David Kvasnik, and I'm here with Rob Page in regards to our request to rezone 2069 Marshall from T2 to T3. Rob and his family own 2069 Marshall, which is currently T2, and my family owns 2063, which is currently T3. Using these two parcels at a neighborhood node to only house 12 people is not in line with the 2040 comprehensive plan. We've been working for close to 4 months with an architect and multiple professionals to put together a plan for a 5-story mixed-use building with commercial space and 48 plus units of apartments with a mix of micro units and 2-bedroom units on the corner of Cleveland and Marshall to replace 2 student rentals. The intersection of Marshall and Cleveland is identified in the 2040 plan as a neighborhood node. The 2040 comprehensive plan explains that, quote, neighborhood nodes are denser concentrations of development relative to the adjacent future land use categories. Policy LU 30 of the 2040 plan specifically states that we should focus growth at neighborhood nodes using the following principles of, quote, increasing density toward the center of the node and transition in scale to surrounding land uses. In fact, the density allowance, according to figure LU 4 of the 2040 plan titled 2040 Residential Land Use Density Range, shows us that the mixed use density at a neighborhood node should be 50 to 200 units per acre. The 2040 comprehensive plan states that the plan is the city's vision or blueprint for guiding future development through 2040. Additionally, it specifically states that it should inform zoning decisions and, quote, zoning actions must be consistent with the comprehensive plan. It goes further on page 18 to say that the comprehensive plan should, quote, guide private investment and, quote, the comprehensive plan also establishes priorities for where the city wants privately funded developments to occur. The quote even goes further to say, and I quote directly, high-density multifamily construction should be concentrated at neighborhood nodes. Rob and I agree with the 2040 comprehensive plan and the city staff report, which recommends approval of our request to rezone 2069 Marshall from T2 to T3 in order to meet this vision.
Thank you so much for your statement.
Thank you, sir.
I'd like to open it up to my colleagues if there are any questions or comments for the applicant. While I have you here, I guess going to what we heard from the district council on wanting us to lay this over so they have an opportunity. Have you been able to connect with the district council and been able to connect with different members of the neighborhood about what your intentions is with this property?
Yes, sir. We've attended the Committee for Land Use Economic Development meeting for Union Park District Council. We attended the Transportation Committee meeting for the Union Park District Council. We attended the January 6th board meeting for the Union Park District Council and answered questions at all of those meetings from neighbors. And additionally, we've promised the Union Park District Council that we will continue to attend meetings of the council and CLUID and the Transportation Board as we continue working on this project. So we have them fully involved.
Thank you for that.
Yes.
Thank you for that answer. Seeing that I don't think I have any other questions or comments from colleagues. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. Now I would like to open up the public hearing for this application. I do see that there are some people here to speak in favor and opposition of it. I'll first start. Is there anyone here to speak in favor of this application? And I see Merritt Clapp-Smith, if I'm correct with the name.
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Clapp-Smith, could you state your name and provide your address for the record?
Yes. Thank you, Chair Baker, members of the Zoning Committee. My name is Merritt Clapp-Smith, and I live at 228 East 8th Street. And I'm speaking today as a board member and on behalf of Sustain St. Paul. So Sustain St. Paul supports the rezoning of 2069 Marshall Avenue from T2 to T3, and we concur with the findings in the staff report, the most important being that the rezoning is consistent with its designation as a neighborhood mode in the comprehensive plan. The lot and the corner one to the east could be combined and viably developed under T2 zoning. However, the corner lot is already zoned T3. The corner parcel alone, with only 50 feet in width, is impractical to develop as a T3 type project. If you look at the proposed parking arrangement that's in the application, you can see that a single row of parking plus a drive lane alone consumes 38 feet of width, leaving only 12 feet on a 50-foot lot for the walls of a building and property line setbacks. The recent rezoning of 2069 Marshall and adjacent lots indicates the desire by the city to encourage redevelopment and increase density. And if the city supports redevelopment of the corner as T3 and the 50-foot width makes that redevelopment impractical, then rezoning 2069 Marshall to T3 is prudent to provide enough width for the T3 scale development. If the city, on the other hand, thinks that T2 scale development at the corner is enough to meet the intent of the comprehensive plan for its neighborhood node location, then retaining 2069 Marshall's T2 will essentially moderate the scale of the development towards T2. In the coming decades, St. Paul's going to be growing and changing to accommodate increased population, diversification, housing needs, and in accordance with the comprehensive plan, every neighborhood is going to have to share in that growth. Now that growth can occur in fewer higher density buildings or in more moderate density buildings. So the first option requires less land, but leaves more of the original buildings and fabric untouched.
Ms.
The latter option
are you able to wrap up?
In scale, but requires more land to accommodate the growth. In either case, we encourage open and active dialogue between the developer, neighbors, and cities to support a project that meets multiple interests. And if more time is needed for that, it is time well spent to build trust and goodwill. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Clapsmith. Is there anyone else here to speak in favor of this application?
Mr. Chair, I would like to speak.
Thank you. Could you please state your name and address for the record?
Yes, I am Jan Miller, and I live at 2068 Eaglehart Avenue. My property is directly behind the property at 2069 Marshall Avenue. The committee has already received my written comments, but I wanted to make an oral statement as well. By your own zoning protocols that were set up in the 2040 city plan, after 4 years of deliberation and hard work by a lot of people, only the corner properties of a neighborhood constitute the node, and only the nodes can be zoned T3. 2069 is not a neighborhood node. The request to rezone 2069 Marshall to T3 should therefore be rejected without further discussion. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Again, this time is there anyone to speak in favor of the application? Is there anyone here to speak in favor of the application? And again, is there anyone here to speak in favor of the application? Hearing none, is there anyone here to speak in opposition of the application?
I would just speak in opposition.
Thank you so much. Could you state your name and address for the record?
Yes, my name is Lillian Hang. I live at 2093 Marshall Avenue.
Thank you. And what would you like to say this time? Your
Great.
2 minutes is yours.
And so unlike the others who have spoken in favor of this change, I live literally 5 houses down from this place, and I oppose the zoning change. Being next to a T3 neighbor does not warrant a zoning change. The West Marshall zoning study already upzoned in 2069 from an R3 to a T2. Nothing has changed since that study. My street, Marshall Avenue, continues to be the exact same transit corridor that it was at the time of that study. If a T2 zoning was adequate for that study, then a T2 zoning is more than adequate today. Developers want to create a multi-unit apartment building. You know what? They can still do exactly that with the current T2 zoning that is instilled. We want a neighborhood to be a vibrant place for families like mine, but we should not create a slippery slope where anyone can change the zoning just because it fits their development and financial gain, as in this very, very obvious case. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate those comments. Is there anyone else here to speak? I think we have some. Is there anyone else here to speak in opposition of this application? I see Andrew Bream.
Yes, hi.
Hi, could you state your name and address for the record?
Yes, my name is Andrew Bream, B as in boy, R-E-A-M as in Mary, 2068 Eaglehart Avenue. And I would like to start just by addressing some of the findings in the report and some of the statements that were just made by the developer, Mr. Kvasnik. So, you know, it is true that Mr. Kvasnik did attend the neighborhood meetings. However, as we have discussed, the Union Park Board has requested that you hold off on making a decision today because, well, Mr. Kvasnik did answer questions at those meetings. He did not answer them sufficiently, and so required more discussion. And then I would like to echo what the previous person said in opposition, which is that this property was just rezoned in 2018 with lots of thought and discussion, making the corner property T3 correctly and making 2069 T2 correctly. Just because it is adjacent to a T3 property does not, by definition, warrant reason to upzone to T3. I would argue that that would constitute spot zoning and would drastically change the character of the neighborhood. And so with that in mind, I would like to urge you to keep the zoning as it is, as it was already rezoned this way in 2018. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bream. Is there anyone else here to speak in opposition of this application?
I would like to speak in opposition.
Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Jonathan Bream, B as in boy, R-E-A-M as in Mary. And also afterwards, I'd like to speak on behalf of my neighbor, George Bounds, who has got pneumonia diagnosed this morning, and I would like time to speak on his behalf, and Ms. Dadla said that was possible. So first I'll speak on my behalf. I live directly behind 2069 Marshall. I've lived on Eaglehart for 30 years. In 2018, the zoning committee rezoned 2069 to T2. My neighbor, Dean Nelson, who lives on Marshall, tells me he spent countless hours working with Ms. Dadlett and others for more than 2 years on the rezoning of Marshall Avenue. After all that time and consideration, the zoning committee upzoned 2069 to T2. That zoning allows for the kind of density consistent with the comprehensive 2040 plan. I asked the zoning committee to stand by your decision. There is no compelling reason to change that carefully considered decision. To do that would set an imprudent precedent for spot zoning for this block and others. The proposal as presented by Mr. Kvasnik raises many concerns. Where is the traffic study, the safety study, the shadow study? I have concerns about a plan with such limited details. Mr. Kvasnik attended 3 meetings of the Union Park Council, or 1 meeting of the Park Council, 2 other committees, the CLUID, the Land Use Committee, and the Transportation Committee. All of them decided not to pass judgment. All asked for more information. They all stated, this is a big ask without much information. I have concerns about Mr. Kvasnik's apparent lack of experience as a developer. And I have concerns about Mr. Page's reputation with his tenants. The college students that live behind us, yes, we do talk to our neighbors, tell me about all kinds of issues they've had with Mr. Page. Given all these concerns, I ask you to reject the upzoning of 2069 to T3. You made a carefully considered, deliberate decision in 2018. I ask Mr. Chairman and the rest of the commissioners, please stick by your decision.
Thank you, Mr. Breen.
And would I have an opportunity to read the statement from George Bounds at this time?
You can. Could you please state his name and address for the record? And I just want to make sure, Mr. Warner, I know that Ms. Dallas said yes, but is this okay?
Chair, that's fine. He has a written thing he could submit, but this is fine. But please keep it to 2 minutes because it looks like there's a lot of people that want to testify.
Thank you, Mr. Warner. Mr. Breen, could you please state the name and address and then read the statement?
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, George Bounds, B as in boy, O-U-N-D as in dog, S, 2072 Eichelhart. And I'll read his oral testimony on his behalf. The owners of 2063 and 2069 Marshall admitted at a Union Park Land Use Committee meeting in December that they had asked for and received upzoning for both properties just 2 years ago without any neighborhood input. Now they're coming back to ask for another upzone so they can build a 5-story building that will dominate Eichelhart neighbors' views from their kitchens, rear screen porches, and patios. Enough is enough. Please reject the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Breen. I do see some hands, and I want to make sure this is in opposition for this application. I see Harry Bailey. Is that correct?
The correct pronunciation is Bali. Thank you.
Sorry.
Okay.
Mr. Bali, are you here to speak in opposition for this application?
I am. And my wife and I are sharing my screen, so she would like to speak in opposition after I go. So my name for the record is Harry, last name Bali, B as in boy, A-L-L-E-Y, and reside at 2062 Eichelhart Avenue. And as the resident that lives directly north of the 2 properties, I am strongly opposed to the change in the zoning to 2069. Quite frankly, I was surprised that Mr. Kvasnik was able to get his property changed to T3 when the lengthy and detailed plan was already in place from 2017, 2018. That said, a change to a 55-foot structure would be definitely out of place in our neighborhood. The property would adversely affect the noise, traffic, shadows, not to mention any elimination, or not to mention the elimination of privacy for the residents directly north. It does seem like these concerns were previously addressed when the original zoning plan for Marshall Avenue was drafted in 2017 and 2018. Now the two owners want to have that significant effort changed quickly and without the proper process to fit their own timetable. The developers also stated that the estimated rents of $1,300 to $1,800 for a one-bedroom apartment, not including the cost of a parking space, I might add. And that does not seem to fit the goal of density and create affordable housing in St. Paul and really for any area for that matter. So thank you, commissioners and chair, for the time and consideration.
Thank you so much for those comments. I'd like to turn it over to, I think, Ms. Bali.
Yes, thank you. My name is Heidi Bali, last name Balley, and I have lived at 2062 Eaglehart Avenue for 25 years. I'm immediately across the alley of the proposed Heightened building. I'm opposed to the rezoning request. I would like to see the process work. I'd like to see representatives of the committee and the representatives of the people of St. Paul and the developers of the city stick to the plans that they took energy, time, research, and process to decide. If this application for rezoning is approved, dismisses decisions as recent as 2018, I would be extremely confused on whether or not there is a process or a 2040 plan. I believe in progress and opportunity, yet not simply for the very few to profit. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Bali. Is there anyone else here to speak in opposition of this application? I think I see Mr. O'Day.
Yes, that is correct.
Could you state your name and address for the address?
My name for the record is John O'Day. That is spelled O''DEA. And my current address is 2069 Marshall Ave, the proposed site.
And we'll open it up for you for 2 minutes to make your comments and testify.
Thank you. Hello, neighbors. Glad to be before you all here today. My name is John O'Day, as I said, and I currently reside at 2069 Marshall Avenue along with my 7 roommates. All of us will be seniors at the University of St. Thomas in the fall and have very much enjoyed our time here in the neighborhood. Back in October, our management company, Level 10 Management, really started pushing us to re-sign our lease on the property, contacting us regularly for weeks, urging that we sign and complete their new lease, even incentivizing us to do so, to, as they put it in their many communications with us, guarantee our place for next year. And while I cannot speak as to what the word guarantee means to Mr. Robert Page, I can tell you that he seems to not feel the need to keep his end of what we were all under the impression was a legally binding agreement. Feeling as though Mr. Robert Page was trying to take advantage of us by telling us that he was voiding our lease, we sought out legal consulting from Homeline, a nonprofit Minnesota tenant advocacy organization, and were told that Mr. Robert Page was in no position to tell us that our lease was no longer valid, as although he will say it was not countersigned on their end, their communications and incentive to complete this contract with them implied their agreement. While I understand this is not something the zoning committee is able to rectify, I see no reason in which a rezoning request should be approved here today at Mr. Robert Page and Mr. David Kavaznik's request, as my roommates and I will be honoring our side of the leasing agreement and occupying the 2069 property through May 2022. Thus, no imminent rezoning is necessary. I urge you all to consider how it is to be in our shoes and have all this uncertainty hanging over our heads regarding our living situations before our senior year here. And as we continue to hear about this proposed plan, well, Mr. Robert Page makes no effort to even acknowledge the fact that he screwed up in leasing out the property longer than he seemingly meant to in hindsight, handling this situation extremely unprofessionally and unethically. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you so much, Mr. O'Day. I do see, I think maybe one other person here to speak in opposition of the application. And that, thought I did. Mr. Schuler?
Yes, thank you for the time today. As a current resident of 2069 Marshall, me and my roommates have experienced firsthand how Robert Page manages a property and conducts his business.
Mr. Schuler, could you state your name and address for the record and then move forward with your statement?
Yes, for sure. My name is Peyton Schuler, Peyton, Schuler, Schuler. And
Thank you.
I reside at 2069 Marshall Ave.
Thank you.
So as I was saying, we have seen firsthand how Robert Page manages a property and conducts business. And in order for us to even get the house into a livable condition, we were forced to tell management that we'd be bringing in the city inspector after 4 months of unsuccessfully requesting basic repairs. There's been an utter lack of care for the property by ownership, and it is clear that simple maintenance and upkeep is of no interest to Robert. I do not think that granting him T3 zoning and thus permission to build an even larger property will change anything about the way he conducts business, as he clearly wants to milk out every dollar. There will be no affordable housing in this plan, where there are already 12 pre-existing affordable apartments on the location, and we believe that those should be preserved. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Schuler. Is there anyone else here to speak in opposition of this application? Is there anyone to speak in opposition of this application? Is there anyone here to speak in opposition of this application? Hearing none, I'd like to call back up the applicant, Mr. Kvasnik,
Yes.
to respond to anything that you've heard.
Yeah, I think there are two very important points, maybe three. First and foremost, I heard a lot of people discuss the fact that they thought that the 2040 plan was part of the rezoning of Marshall. And the truth of the matter is that the rezoning of Marshall occurred in 2018 and was done under the 2030 plan. And the 2030 plan for that specific corner, when we didn't have neighborhood nodes, to be honest with you, the 2030 plan dictated that that corner should only have a density of 4 to 30 units. Subsequent to the zoning and after the zoning, we went to the 2040 plan, which was just enacted a couple of months ago. That plan, which is the new plan, is the plan that we're making this request under. And that plan specifically states, and I'll read it to you, let's see here. It specifically states 2040 residential land use density ranges show that a mixed use density at a neighborhood node should be 50 to 200 units per an acre. Rob and I have 0.42 acres, which would equal 84 units for that parcel on the corner. And that's what the city intended with that. The 2018 Marshall rezoning was done under the 2030 plan, which is completely a different set of scenarios than the 2040 plan, which we're working under now. And we're requesting this under the 2040 plan, which lays out a much different density situation and includes neighborhood nodes, which weren't included in the 2030 plan and did not exist during the zoning in 2018. That's the first point. The second point is they brought up the cost of rent. They said that maybe it's $1,400 to $1,600. Rob and I have been making an effort to get micro units and 2-bedroom units into this building. That's the focus, because we understand that the affordability component cannot be met with the 1-bedrooms because of the size of the building. So what we're doing is we're currently trying to add micros and 2-bedrooms to get micros in at $900 and 2-bedrooms in at $1,600, which is, you know, the equivalent of $800 per person in the 2-bedroom. So we want to make it a place that, say, for instance, a person who can do a $900 rent, they can afford to live there. On top of that, we're adding amenities that people aren't mentioning in here that we have mentioned at earlier meetings, like electric vehicle charging stations in the building, bike parking, secure bike parking for every single unit in the building, transit-oriented maps and whatnot to hit the 86, the 21, and the BRT that are scheduled to be on that exact street in the next couple of years. In fact, BRT funding was just federally funded in this last year. Light rail station is only 1.4 miles away at Fairview. So I wanted to address those things to make sure that everybody knows that our plans are affordable units, and they're based on the 2040 plan going forward, including neighborhood nodes, which had nothing, absolutely nothing to do with the Marshall Avenue rezoning that was done in 2018 because it didn't even exist at that time.
Thank you, Mr. Kvasnik.
Thank you,
I open it up to my colleagues. Any questions for the applicant or any comments at this time? bear with me as I go between screens, trying to make sure that I see. All right. I do see something. I see a question from, I think, Mr. Dermody. I'm sorry, Mr. Lindicky.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was curious about the question about a lease, a current lease. I see, does the applicant know anything about the status of the lease for the current occupants?
This is Rob Page.
Mr. Page, could you, because we haven't heard you before, could you please state your name and address for the record?
Rob Page, Page. Address is 4209 Christie Lane.
Thank you.
Yes, I mean it's a private matter, so it's between tenant and landlord, and we're working on it as such, and we don't think it's a forum for that matter here.
Yeah, if I could say something.
As of right now, for those that have spoken opposition or an approval of the application, you cannot say anything at this time. I apologize.
That's right. That's right. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Page. Mr. Lindicky, did you have anything else?
No.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments for the applicant?
I see Commissioner Grill has her hand up, though, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Thank you so much, Mr. Lindicky. Commissioner Grill.
This is Commissioner Grill. I think I was a little ahead of the curve, though. So my question's not for the applicant, it's for discussion. So you can skip ahead of me.
Okay. Any other questions or comments for the applicant? Hearing none, we are closing the public hearing portion for this application. Thank you so much, Mr. Kvasnik and Mr. Page, and all of the applicants that provided testimony in favor or opposition of the application. Now I would open it up to colleagues for discussion and or a motion. And I will start with Commissioner Grill.
This is Commissioner Grill. My question, or I may have a question, it's also just a point for discussion. I'm wondering, because I remember in previous zoning cases that we couldn't take really anything besides just the zoning into account while we made the decision. And perhaps this is a question for Mr. Warner, but just clarification on that we're really speaking to just the change in zoning. We're not speaking to the new property itself or any of the other scenarios that are sort of operating in conjunction with this particular issue.
Chair, if I may.
Yes, Mr. Warner, thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Grill, that's correct. If your question is, can you place conditions on a rezoning? No, you can't. You're simply just to move the recommendation one way or the other.
Thank you, Mr. Warner. Any other discussion? So I'd like to make a comment. I definitely understand where I'm hearing kind of the sentiment from, or heard of the sentiment from many residents speaking in opposition for this application, and I think the concern is somewhat with what Commissioner Grill is talking about, which is talking more about what to expect with the construction of the site. And our goal right now, or not our goal, our task is to talk about rezoning. And it comes across from staff's recommendation and that the findings were met for approval. I still, even though findings were met, and I would personally need to, I'm planning to support that. I do think that it is incumbent upon the applicant to have more conversation with residents. What we're hearing from residents is they're rightfully or wrongfully so, they're feeling left out of the conversation that there is something new that is about to potentially go into the neighborhood, and they would like to have more conversation and understand what's happening, because even though some may feel it's subjective on what this property will do to the overall character of the neighborhood, it's heartfelt and is real to residents that are living in that neighborhood. And so I just think that it is the right thing to do, is to have more conversation and in my estimation, over communicate with the intentions, because this is, again, something that is going to be new in this neighborhood. And we've heard from a lot of neighbors that have actually been in that neighborhood for years, that are just concerned and worried about what's happening and what's going on. So again, our goal here is to talk about the rezoning effort, but I do think that I would like to highly encourage the applicant to have greater conversation. I know that the applicant highlighted and stated that they went to meetings, but I will tell you, in my estimation, from what I heard, it came more across as a check the box rather than true opportunity to connect with neighbors and answer questions that gives them greater information and insight and clarity on what to expect moving forward, and also potentially input, since you're all one neighborhood. I see Commissioner Lindeke with a question.
Nope, I don't have a question, Mr. Chair. I just turned my video on in solidarity with you.
I appreciate that, Commissioner Lindeke and Commissioner Grill. Commissioner Grill.
I do want to second your comments. I do think it would be really advantageous for the developer to have more conversations with the community and with their neighbors. That being said, I don't see anything here that would prevent us from supporting the staff recommendation. So I'm going to make a motion to approve the staff recommendation of the rezoning from T2 traditional neighborhood to T3 traditional neighborhood at 2069 Marshall Avenue.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Lindeke.
We have a second from Commissioner Lindeke. All right, we'll go forward with the vote.
Should we have discussion before we vote, Mr. Chair?
I apologize. Is there more discussion that would be needed, or that would?
I see Commissioner Syed has his hand up for the record.
Thank you so much. I appreciate. Commissioners, thank you so much for giving me a heads up on this. This is helpful as I navigate. Nobody can do it like our former chair Edgerton, but I'm learning. So, Commissioner Syed.
Well, thanks, Chair. This is Commissioner Syed. I think you did answer my question, and that yeah, thanks.
Okay, let me just make sure. Commissioner Lindeke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You're doing a great job leading the meeting, in my opinion. So don't feel bad. But I just wanted to express that I think the narrow case of whether this should be T2 or T3, the fact that the neighboring property is T3, but I think it would be very difficult to build anything that would be in that zoning category on the site, is a kind of compelling argument for this, just the zoning in and of itself. And the other thing I've been thinking about is the ABRT investment that's going into Marshall and Lake that is coming a few years from now, I think. But those projects that Metro Transit builds are big investments in St. Paul, and in a future where we don't have to drive everywhere to get around and can take transit. And that's just really important for climate change, for economic opportunity, because owning a car is very expensive, and lots of other reasons that transit pollution, for example, is important to incentivize. So I really think we should be building more housing in places where you have those transit investments. And so that's a big reason to support this rezoning. And it is something that has changed since the Marshall Avenue study was done a few years ago. At that point, the B line was on the map technically, but not funded, and nobody was sure when it would be built. So that's something that I think that I'd like to focus on, is a way that I'm making my decision here.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Lindicky. Any other discussion from commissioners? Good to see Commissioner Edgerton on camera.
If Commissioner Lindicky's going to do it, I should too.
Hey, solidarity. I appreciate it. If there is no more discussion at this time, and I'm looking at the chat, I don't think I see anything. If not, I'd like to move forward with the vote.
Commissioner Edgerton? Commissioner Edgerton?
Yes.
Commissioner Grill?
Yes.
Commissioner Lindicky?
Yes.
Commissioner Rangel Morales?
Yes.
Commissioner Said?
Yes.
And Chair Baker?
Yes.
6 in favor, 0 opposed.
All right. Thank you. That motion passes. Before we move on to our last item of business under new business, we did not approve the December 31st zoning committee minutes. I'd like to have a motion and a second to approve our committee meeting minutes for the zoning committee meeting for December 31st, 2020.
Commissioner Edgerton?
I think we had Commissioner Grill for Commissioner Grill.
I move the minutes.
Do I have a second?
Commissioner Edgerton seconds.
Commissioner Edgerton has a second. I have a motion and a second. Let's vote, please.
Commissioner Edgerton?
Yes.
Commissioner Grill?
Yes.
Commissioner Hood? Oh. Commissioner Lindicky?
Yes.
Commissioner Rangel Morales?
Yes.
Commissioner Said?
Yes.
And Chair Baker?
Yes.
6 in favor, 0 opposed.
Thank you so much. Our last item of business under new business is Lexington Station Apartments, a site plan for a new 6-story mixed-use development with 288 residential units, ground floor commercial and amenity space, and structured parking. And to present the staff report, we have Ms. Anderson with us. Welcome, Ms. Anderson.
This is Ms. Anderson. It will actually be Ms. Ashley Scarda who will be presenting on behalf of the Department of Safety and Inspection Zoning Division. Ashley,
Thank you.
Here.
Welcome, Ms. Scarda. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Well, good evening, all. My name is, you mentioned, it's Ashley Scarda, and I'm a zoning inspector at the Department of Safety and Inspections. I coordinate the Site Plan Review Committee with TIA, and I'm here today to present on the staff report for the Lexington Station Apartments file. Before I do that, I just want to say thank you to other city staff who helped me prepare today, especially Katie Dadless and Tia Anderson. Really appreciate it. And Sam as well. I want to share my PowerPoint and just want to make sure I'm sharing the right. There we go. Can you guys?
We are able to see that.
See that? And then I think I want to say from another file, there's maybe a good button for me to push that helps you guys see it full screen. Anyone feel free to call it out if you're having a hard time.
From beginning.
From beginning, okay. And then I think, okay, I still have access to you guys over here. Awesome, cool. So, a brief history on the project. Atlas began working on the project in early 2019. There's been a lot of preliminary discussions about the project. I wasn't working with site plan review the whole time, but a lot of them were in hopes to sort out some of the project's technical details amongst the various city reviewers. The project, I'll note, didn't receive any special funding or grants, meaning that none of the site plan review committee members would be reviewing any requirements relating to affordability as part of the site plan review. And yeah, like I mentioned, most of these meetings have been about like technical details. For example, Public Works, Parks, and the county all have some jurisdiction over Lexington Parkway. So we needed to make sure everyone was in consensus. The project team held a preliminary site plan review discussion on December 1st with our committee. At your December 4th Planning Commission meeting, you voted, or it was voted, to hold a public hearing for the site plan once the full application was received. We received that full application along with the plan set on December 22nd and got that out to you guys. While preparing for this, the review committee was also doing a review of the project in the background, which is normal for us. We receive the plan, everybody gets it, they need to go through and do a review. My reviewers completed their cycle on January 8th, and then we issued a memo to the project team noting all the required revisions. And then we're here today on January 14th. And the project we're talking about today is the site plan review of a 6-story mixed-use building in the Lexington Station area. The two properties are shown right here, not highlighted. I'll note that they're in a large chunk of T4 traditional neighborhood zoning that follows to the north in a commercial area. It also goes to the west into this institutional use. This is the Wilder site. It continues with this multifamily residential use. It's a Cardi Heights affordable senior, I believe. Down to the south, we have T3 zoning district, which is our Speedway site, as well as a row of single family homes. Over to the east, we've got a mix of T2 and T3. The T3 would be O'Reilly and Dairy Queen, as well as the little strip mall towards University. And the the T3 is up by University. The T2 is the multifamily here in orange. They're apartment buildings. And I'd like to note that the site itself is in the Union Park District Council. That said, University and Lexington is the crossroad of 4 different district councils. And that's important as we're looking at this: Union Park, Hamlin Midway, the Frogtown Neighborhood Association, and Summit University. And at the time of my staff report, I hadn't received any formal comment on this submission from Union Park District Council. Although I believe that the district council had hosted multiple community meetings regarding this future development. A few other things. Oh, here's some current existing views from adjacent properties that were provided in case anyone still having a hard time visualizing the site. This development was reviewed for compliance with the zoning code as well as other local ordinances. I'd be looking at zoning with the staff from PED, and then folks from all the other departments, sewers, water, they're going to respond on their things or their subject area. For us in zoning, these are the main parts of the zoning code that we usually call on. And I'm sure you're familiar with some of them. We've got the site here. It's an S-shaped building, and you'll notice that there's no curb cut along Lexington. This is an alley down here to the south. The main entrance to the parking areas, there's a small one here for the commercial use and a larger one here, and we'll show that later as well. But just with this up above, I wanted to point that out. Hold on. And so enter to the parking there. You'll see these roads here, they're part of the existing site circulation for Wilder, and those are continuing. For example, if someone were to come in today and try to go to Carty Heights, they'd drive in here and turn down. So they've continued site circulation. They've added a drop-off area to the north and a little porte cochere. There's a move-in ground or a move-in garage off the alley, and that's really the only entrance off the alley. It's just for that move-in garage to help keep people out of the right of way. And then you can see a little bit of the inside here. There is a commercial use on this northwest corner. It has its own separate parking garage. The area along Lexington Avenue is the more activated use. So there's a shared office space. There's a fitness space for the residents. There's a large secure bike room and also bike maintenance. And that's all off of Lexington. And as I'm calling these things out, these are all things that are part of those zoning ordinances I mentioned before. And then I had a few questions about people for the layout. This is what we've seen so far for the layout. You'll notice that floor 2 and above are in S shape, and there's a floor 2 courtyard. So there's 2 courtyards for the residents to do, outdoor activities, but in a semi-private way. So now that we've seen an over the project, let's talk through the findings. Chapter 61.402C of the zoning code says that in order to approve a site plan, the Planning Commission shall consider and find that the site plan is consistent with the findings listed below. And there are 11 findings, and that was what our main site plan looked at. So as we go through them, I will make sure to read the finding from the code and then answer to it. So number 1, the city's adopted comprehensive plan and a development or project plans for the subareas of the city. The site plan is consistent or on balance with the comp plan. The project is bringing density to a transit area in a neighborhood node. It provides a mixed-use building that's considerate of multimodal use and encourages public transportation use. The comp plan calls for maximizing housing and locational choices for residents of all income levels, new housing, and infill development. Although affordability is not the purview of site plan review, I know it's of concern today and suspect that the project representatives will be able to speak to the affordability mix because it's not part of zoning. There were also, I believe when they did the findings, Katie also, oops, did I lose you guys?
No, we're still here.
No, you're still there. Okay, cool. I tried to move the pop-up and I thought it went away. They did review the Union Park Community Plan as well as the Lexington Station Plan. And those are from 2016 and 2008, respectively. And there were some concerns about north, south, and east-west bike ped connections as they relate to these plans, and I'll specifically speak to them more when we get to transportation. And then for more detailed analysis, I included that one of the planners did do a Lexington Station site plan review comprehensive plan summary, which I'm not a planner by trade. So if you want it more in those terms, that document would be great for you. Number 2, applicable ordinances of the city. The site plan meets this finding. The site plan complies with key zoning ordinances. If you recall up in slide 5, I highlighted those zoning codes, the intent of the code, the traditional neighborhood density, dimensional standards, parking, building design standards. We've reviewed what they've submitted so far, and so far the plans, they're meeting the codes. We haven't identified any variances, any cup, anything like that. They just meet the code as is, or might need a minor kind of change, like oh, I counted this many spots here and this many there, and make sure there's consistency. So as I talk about revisions, those are the type of revisions that are going on right now. It's not anything major that would suddenly cause us to suspect a variance might be down the road. For number 3 is about the preservation of unique geologic, geographic, or historically significant characteristics of the city and environmentally sensitive areas. The site plan meets this finding based on the fact that this vacant land is neither designated as having historical significance or environmental significance. And specifically, it's not located within any of our identified historic state districts, local districts, any of our other city areas where, you know, if you're in this area, here's a set of rules that need to be applied. We have those for tree preservation and steep slope in some historical areas, but there were none present here. Number 4, protection of adjacent neighboring properties through reasonable provision for such matters as surface water drainage, sound and sight buffers, preservation of views, light and air, and those aspects of design which may have substantial effects on neighboring land uses. The site plan meets this finding, and we find that the effect of the specific proposed building on neighboring properties is reasonable. And specific to these findings, we look to the zoning code and other ordinances. They're adding a stormwater system here in the back. They've done all the HydroCAD calculations to connect it to the system. It will be able to handle the standard rain level up to the 100-year flood level. They do all these calculations, and these things are all part of what's going on. The height and the setbacks that would allow us light and air situations, for a T4 zone, those are all being met. The parking is being met. The design standards for those T districts, usually it talks about materials, the percentage of window and door openings, attention to having pedestrian entrances on street frontages. Things like that have all been considered. Number 5, the arrangement of buildings, uses, and facilities of the proposed development in order to assure abutting property and or its occupants will not be unreasonably affected. And in the zoning code, the things that we would look for, the effect of this, the site plan meets this finding because the effect of the specific proposed building on neighboring properties would be considered reasonable. Keep in mind it's a T4 zone, so one could affect or expect things typical of denser development. For example, a taller building would cast a shadow. Here we've got a shadow study that they provided, and we can notice that it's not casting a shadow on the single family homes or the residential buildings, and it's kind of similar to some of the other structures nearby. Other things that would help regulate not unreasonably affecting the neighbors would be those protected courtyards, meeting the setbacks, having enough structured parking, having the entrance for that parking be off the rear of the building off of a private street so that cars aren't stopping and queuing for the parking garage on Lexington. Trash and recycling haulers are coming to the back to the parking structure for that. For number 6, it's creation of energy conserving design through landscaping and location, orientation, and elevation of structures. The site plan meets this finding because higher density development is inherently more energy conserving. There's fewer exterior walls per dwelling unit than low density housing, minimizing heat loss. They've exceeded the minimum number of window glazing percentage, so they'll have more ability to gain some solar heat. The proposed development is in the Lexington station area, and it's also 4 blocks south of an enhanced bike route that's conducive to walking, biking, and using public transit rather than driving. There's been a secure indoor bicycle parking area and a maintenance area, and it's located off of Lexington Parkway instead of in the back. So folks coming from transit will have a quicker entrance to the building. sorry. Number 7, safety and convenience of both vehicular and pedestrian traffic, both within the site and in relation to access streets, including traffic circulation features and locations and design of entrances and exits and parking areas within the site. The site plan meets the finding. Access to both the parking structures are off the private drive in the rear. The existing private drives have been incorporated in their current position for the least impact to the existing neighbors inside the site. The move-in garage is the only thing accessed off the alley, further reducing blockages in the public right-of-way. Regarding the vision of a more connected Fuller Avenue as described in the 2008 document for the Lexington Area Station Plan, a conclusion was made after many of those meetings that I spoke of this summer with planning, parks, and public works staff that since there has been since there is no and has been no action on part of the city to move forward on a fuller extension in the 10 years since we've had the station area plan adopted, and as well no action towards acquiring the right-of-ways necessary to connect this. In the absence of the effort to do so, it was determined that the private property owner is free to undertake development. And that was, the agreement of various bits of our reviewers. And with regards to the north-south path along Lexington, there is a 12-foot sidewalk as well as a 15-plus foot boulevard present. And as plans come into fruition about the future mobility area, what it's to look like, how we're going to set it up, exactly. We know that there's more than the minimum 14 feet available. And in the end here, the 12-foot was decided on by Parks because Lexington Parkway is their jurisdiction and they're not comfortable with sidewalks of 14 feet on their own. So they said for now they'd let it go up to 12 feet. We have the additional boulevard area, and when a neighborhood plan comes forward for exactly what those future mobility areas are to look like, they'll have the extra few feet, if not much more than that, to be able to accommodate that future connection there. Number 8, the satisfactory availability and capacity of the storm and sanitary sewers, including solutions to any drainage problems in the area of the development. Like I mentioned before, Sewers has been working on it, Water's been working on it. So the site plan meets this finding. The utility sheets are reviewed by our sewer and water engineers, making sure that the current infrastructure can support the project. There was some existing stormwater management on the site from when Wilder went in, and I believe the project worked with Sewers to try to add to the system and join on and use that existing infrastructure, and then make sure it had the capacity with what they're adding to take the whole site and not disrupt what was there. There is sufficient landscaping and parking provided to meet the zoning code. Specifically, the code says sufficient landscaping, fences, walls, and parking necessary to meet the above objectives. The site plan meets this finding. The setback areas around the building will be landscaped and the plan will be approved by the city forester. Existing boulevard trees will be protected where possible and new ones will be planted. Parking wise, in theory, there's no parking required within University Avenue within a quarter mile. And this project is proposing 254 parking spaces, 13 for the structured commercial lot and 241 for the residential. We made sure to run the math to make sure that yes, indeed, this would comply with all the zoning code. Number 10, site accessibility is in accordance with the provisions of the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, including parking spaces, passenger loading zones, and accessible routes. Site plan definitely meets this requirement. All the ADA parking spaces will be provided. The floors of the commercial space and the lobby will match the sidewalk grades, and the sidewalk grades have accessible crossings. And number 11, provision for erosion and sediment control as specified in the Ramsey County Erosion Sediment Control Handbook. The plans have been reviewed for this, and also the site plan meets this finding. Their erosion and settlement control plans met this standard, sorry. So in conclusion, based on the finding above, the staff recommends the approval of the site plan to allow a 6-story mixed-use building at 411 and 417 Lexington Parkway North with the following conditions. That the final landscape plan be approved by the city forester, that sewer plans and technical details be approved by Public Works Sewer Division, that the traffic impact study shall be accepted and the plans be approved by Public Works Traffic Engineering, that the final utility plan be approved by St. Paul Regional Water Services, and that the lots be combined with Ramsey County records and mapping. And for those that aren't familiar with why we'd ask for those conditions, those are things typical of any site plan review. So all those departments I listed would be signing off on any site plan review. And as we're kind of mid-review of this project, these are the things that we'd want to make sure get tied up before the end. There was testimony received after I submitted the report, both for and against the project. And I think with that, Chair, I will turn it back to you with questions. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Ms. Carter. Thank you for the detail. My request is that if you are not, I would like everyone to have
Can't hear you.
Chair's muted. Can somebody fix that?
Chair Baker, you appear to be muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yep.
Oh, thank you. Can I ask everyone to mute their phones at this time? I apologize about that. I was just talking a lot, and apparently you heard none of it. So I will move forward to say that I'll open it up for colleagues. If you have any questions for Ms. Sakata at this time, comments from staff? All right, Commissioner Grill.
Chair, Commissioner Grill has a question, hand up there.
Commissioner Grill.
My question was regarding the bike connection that was called out in some of the resident letters. They had commented about the blockage of a through bikeway, and I'm just curious if you could provide some information on that. I heard some things about transportation, but I didn't hear that specifically, and it's possible I missed it. So bear with me if I did.
No worry. And sorry, I closed my slide there, but it's that the Lexington Station Area Plan from 2008 calls for a connection of Fuller Avenue, which stops at this property, and no public right-of-way picks up till approximately right before Snelling, when it's the right-of-way that's looping around the stadium. So in all the meetings this summer, where Parks and the county and Public Works and planning in the city were discussing everybody's jurisdiction and what applies where, the end decision was that specifically, and these are their rules, that there is no and there has been no action on part of the city to move forward on a Fuller extension in the 10 years since the station area plan was adopted. So they haven't vacated any more right-of-ways or put in a bike lane from Lexington to the stadium. And the decision was that in the absence of any effort to do so, the private property owner would be free to undertake development. So, and then, I don't know, someone commented,
Yeah.
one of the other planners did.
Does the staff, another staff member would like to chime in on this? If not, I see Commissioner Said.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Is there any district council where opposite on those or in favor?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that again, Commissioner Said?
Is there any district councils were against this applicant or in favor?
If I heard that correctly, did you say if are there any city council who has been in favor of this application?
No, sorry. Let me remove my face. Is there any district council?
Oh, got it.
Yeah.
Yep. So he was saying pretty much where did the district council fall on this application?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Baker and Committee Member Said. We didn't hear back from Union Park specifically since the full application had been received, so we have no official communication on this one. We did receive correspondence from a few members of Frogtown, Lexington Hamlin, I believe some of you, I'm going off memory at this point, I believe they were in the packet, but the main thing to note is that the district council that the property is located in, we haven't heard anything new from them on this one, but surrounding neighbors and groups have commented.
Thank you for that. Any other questions or comments for staff? Okay, if not, we'd like to move forward in calling up the applicant at this time. Is the applicant here? Is the applicant here?
He is. It's Chris Odds. And it looks like he's working on his mic.
Okay. I see him on screen. Well, I did. We'll give it a few moments as we kind of work through that.
Thank you, Chair.
I think I hear Mr. Osmundson. Is the applicant here? Sounds like we have audio. Okay, it sounds like the applicant will leave and call back or come back into the meeting.
Yes, one of the architects speaking. Chris is here. Can you hear us okay?
I'm hearing an echo. If you currently don't have your phone or computer on, I ask that you do so at this time. Okay. All right. Oh, I do hear. Okay. Why don't we?
I was going to say, if Chris can't get on, we could maybe give some oversight and sort of, though we're not necessarily applicant, at least we could help keep things moving. And I could
Thank you for that. We appreciate it. Could you provide your name and address for the record?
Yeah, so we're the architects for the project. Dean DeVolis, 33 Washington Avenue North, Minneapolis, Minnesota. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Michael Kuntz, live in Minneapolis.
So we'll give you a quick oversight of the project and some of the things Chris is going to say. And Chris may kill me if I misspeak, but it's better to keep things moving. So we basically essentially kept the design. We kept the building as an S shape to scale it. So a lot of it was architectural integration of the plan and nature of that. It's a modular project. And the second one that's going up in St. Paul, the first one's to be built on West 7th. Going modular allows us to create a lot more affordability with the project. I'm getting an echo again, aren't I? Is that us?
I wonder if has Chris joined us? You can continue.
Okay. And my apologies. On that basis, so you saw the images. It's really worked off the present design and really worked within the T zoning as was presented on that basis. The project is over 50%, 60% AMI. So in other words, 50% units are at 60% of the median income for the Redtown area. So we did really work to get an affordability function in the project, because I know that I listened to some of the previous projects. That was one thing. We really made an effort to keep that within the development in that basis. So we thought that's a nice mix. It's a nice mix of housing in that standard. The bike lane has been incorporated. It runs along the north side of the property, so we did honor it. We didn't want to bring it through the center because it would be going through a parking lot, which we thought was just a very negative environment. So the thought was, and we made accommodations to it, that it runs along the north side of the property and continues on. So if it ever is hooked in, the project was designed to make that consideration to work off of that. So that was a consideration that was pulled within the development. And outside of that, there's questions. It sort of speaks for itself. It's appropriate density. It's a transit corridor. It seems in a good location. It provides a lot of needed housing area, and it provides a lot of affordability, which is key to it. The modular construction gives the ability to make it more affordable, actually better quality. And we've got several modular projects under construction on the Twin Cities. One in Minneapolis is completed. As I said, West 7th at the Bonfie site, which is under construction, which is 192 units, 7 stories. And then this one that we're taking through the planning process now. So that's a quick background. Mike, have you got anything to add that I may have overlooked?
No, I think I'd just like to say this project we're trying to make it affordable by creating small units and this modular construction technique. So, we also have a number of different unit types. We've got a 4-bedroom unit type that's more of a co-living concept. And so there's 4 bedrooms there that are each lockable doors. They share a kitchen and a living area. So those are some of the ways and strategies that we're trying to make the project affordable.
So we go from efficiency all over 4 bedrooms. We've also made sure it's 9-foot ceilings and large windows, because that really helps add a quality of life. And then obviously, as you saw, the building has amenities in terms of 2 recreational areas on the decks, work study rooms on all floors, common areas, things like that. So really try to make it affordable, but have all the enhancements you would find with what I call a typical luxury building. So we have a nice combination that works on both aspects of this.
I wanted to interject, and I think that Chris Osmundson is with us. Could you test your microphone?
Chair, are you able to hear me?
We are.
Okay, sorry. I apologize, everybody. I made it through the first 2 hours of conversations and then had a technical failure there. So that is my fault. I'll quickly go over sort of the presentation that I had, but I believe that DJR had taken care of most of the kind of prominent facts.
Is it possible for you to state your name and address for the record?
Oh, yes, I apologize. So my name is Chris Osmondson. I'm the Director of Development with Lattice LLC. We are located at 800 South 8th Street in Minneapolis. I'm specifically a Minneapolis resident. So thank you, everybody. Sorry again. Knew that was going to happen. We're bringing before you a 288 unit facility here. It is entirely privately financed. It is a market rate development with 254 structured parking stalls. Those are on grade and below grade as well. And then we have approximately 3,000 square feet of retail area. You'll notice in the site plan and some of the other documents that were submitted with our application, the 3,000 square feet is sort of integrated into the lobby-way. We did that so that it was sort of a public-private access. So while there is securitized entryways for guests or residents, there is also the ability to kind of have a public gathering space with a coffee shop or a deli or whatever may go there, kind of pending what happens to the retail environment here in the next 12 months. It's obviously a little bit uncertain to say. I think, as everyone knows, it was discussed by Ashley, I believe, and thank you for that introduction, Ashley. The site has been vacant for about 12 years. There have been, I believe, 2 previous proposals on the site for market rate and affordable housing using the low-income housing tax credit. They haven't amounted to ultimately proposals that have gone through. I think most recently, everyone knows this as a little bit of the large iceberg of snow that was collected from '94 and dumped here at this location. So we would certainly like to see that changed. As Ashley mentioned, also the connection through with Fuller has not been enacted in any of those periods, and so that does feed into the bike and pedestrian discussion that we can certainly interject on and discuss further. As this team knows, we're not requesting any variances of any manner, and the development being proposed is entirely of right. Just some significant site considerations, as Ashley already mentioned. We do have the 12-foot kind of enhanced pedestrian walkway, as well as a 16-foot and 2-inch boulevard on the north and south Lexington Parkway corridor there. As Ashley mentioned, those are really envisioned for future conditions. We've had numerous discussions with parks and various other public works components about how this would work. We're sort of first in, so we want to be able to accommodate whatever future conditions may exist, whether that's a connection through and to from Fuller or actually coming west to east via something over by Allianz or as you get closer to Snelling. So that is a future condition there, but it certainly will be an improvement. We've added the ability to have interior circulation to the building for things like trash and move-in, so there shouldn't be any congestion. Most certainly on Lexington Parkway North, we absolutely don't want anyone parking a moving truck on that location, but also on the private drive aisles going both east and west and north and south. And that is also why we've added a portico share, just to minimize any confusion with a drop off or a delivery. Lastly, I just do want to point out, just in kind of site considerations, the proximity of this site to an affordable grocer in the Aldi that's located just to the north here, which is one of the few grocers remaining in this area. After some of the exits over in the Midway shopping retail center, and obviously the adjacency to the Midway Peace Park, which is just to the west of this site and easily walkable. While I know that a few of these things are outside of the purview of this committee, I did want to touch on, I believe the modular construction component was already being discussed. That will enhance the delivery timeline of this project, meaning that more units in this area would come online more quickly, which I will briefly discuss some of the affordable discussions that have been brought up in the letters submitted for public comment. I also wanted to note we are going to be installing a solar array onto the top of this project. That solar array system will be responsible for approximately 55% of the electricity consumption here, increasing the sustainability of this project beyond just the modular construction. And then in addition to that, we are going to be installing a what's called a variable refrigerant heating and cooling system. If you're familiar with these systems, it's basically a centralized heating and cooling system that is entirely electrically derived, but for when temperatures are extremely cold. And as a result of that, this system pumps gas as opposed to water through the building, and it results in utility bill reductions of approximately 30%, and obviously increased sustainability when paired with the solar array system. Lastly, I've seen a bunch of the comments here in the sidebar related to some of the affordability components. Again, while that is a little bit outside of the purview of the zoning committee here, I feel that it's important to discuss that because it certainly feeds into all of these considerations that we've incorporated into this project, not only to make your rental rate and the check that you write less, but also to reduce the ancillary costs associated with renting. Currently, with the 288 units, we are scheduled to have 155 of them at or below 60% area median income rental rates as established in 2020, which is significant for a privately financed, unsubsidized project. I frankly don't know of others other than low-income housing tax credit projects. Additionally, the co-living units, which I think we were discussing, there's 15 of those with 4 beds each. Each tenant effectively has 400 to 425 square feet of private space, which would include a convertible living and bedroom with a vanity and closet area, and then basically you're just sharing a kitchen facility. Those will be less than $1,000, most likely somewhere in the range of $800 to $950, which is approximately 50 to 55% area median income rental rates. So a significant portion, actually over 50% of the units, just on a straight line basis, will be affordable to some level, even though we are not seeking any subsidy. And I think that jives very well with the 2040 comprehensive plan and some of the goals for equity, growth, density, and certainly sustainability. I've seen a few questions on the square footages. I just mentioned the co-living. Those units are intended to be smaller. Those are about 425 for one of those, but the co-living suites in themselves are about 1,700 square feet in total for those 4 bedrooms. The studios and efficiencies are anywhere from 450 to 600 square feet. With that, I can certainly fill in some of the other components of the margin, which is a little bit outside of this discussion, but I'd like to turn it back over to the chair and committee members, and if there's any further questions of me, or if DJR or Laux needs to intervene in any questions, we're certainly here to do so. And again, I apologize for my technological malfunctions there earlier, and thanks for bearing with me there.
Thanks, Mr. Ombuds. I appreciate the information, and I had an initial question was, and then I'll get to Commissioner Lindicke, is do you consider the apartments, the size of the apartments that you said I think was around 420 or 425 square feet, are you all considering those micro apartments?
So, yes, Chair. So again, this is Chris Osmondson. I'll just state that so that if anyone's listening without reading, they can say that. Just to kind of correct that statement so that it's linear and everyone can follow, we have 15 co-living suites in this project. Each of the 15 co-living suites has 4 bedrooms in it. So there's a total of 60 bedrooms there, with a total of 15 kitchens. Those units within the co-living are right now scheduled at 425 feet with what was submitted there. And so that unit is bathroom, shower, vanity, closet. It's a convertible living space. Actually, the bedroom goes up into the ceiling, so it's totally convertible and then changes into a couch. It's the Silicon Valley version of a Murphy bed, I guess you could call it. Those are smaller. Technically those would be I think would be micro units in this market. The studio and efficiencies, so the actual 155 units that are unit 101 or 102, and just have one single door, those do run a little bit larger. Those are going to probably average at 500 to 550 square feet. So those, and there's a difference there in terms of the rental rates. But those are the square footages that we're envisioning here with the site plan. I do want to point out we've also made accommodations within the amenity spaces to make sure that we're utilizing them in a nature that accommodates people living in smaller spaces. So you'll notice on the site plan, we've really tried to actually identify work from home locations so that if someone is, in one of those smaller studios, they actually do have somewhere to go and can be managed with technologies that allows a resident to go in there for free. And if someone from the public would like to come in and maybe have a membership, they could do so. So it's catered to an environment where smaller units are utilized, but we obviously need to give residents an experience that is post-COVID, I'll say.
Thank you, Commissioner Lindicke.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Chair. And to the applicant, I'm interested in the conversation about the bike lane. And I was looking at your site plan, and I don't really see any markings, or I don't know what you mean. You say there's a bike lane on the north side. What is that? What are you talking about?
Yeah, that's a fair comment. So I'll say how I have envisioned it. I've been looking at the site plan, and I do think there's a little bit of room for improvement there. Originally the bike lane, so to speak, that would cross at Fuller, across Lexington, and would need to be, a controlled intersection for certain, was envisioned to essentially cross at Lexington, travel northbound along Lexington Parkway North, and then actually take a left at that private ingress and essentially go around the building, the north side, and then bend back, and then ultimately go out the private egress on the west side out to Dunlap, and then continue on through sort of the called through. I think in an effort to make sure we were trying to address future conditions that were a little tentative, it wasn't labeled on there, and that was more of a discussion with Public Works. And so we were in a little bit of a tough spot with respects to what we should put on that site plan. And I'll let Mike with DJR speak to that more if I didn't do an appropriate job of explaining it.
Go ahead.
Would you like to add anything?
Mike Kuntz with DJR. the intent of the bike path was to, bring the bikes that come across Fuller into a curb cut there along Fuller, and then provide, as part of that 12-foot wide bike/pedestrian path along Lexington, to let bikes share that path with pedestrians. We had a lot of discussions with city staff, and no one really wanted to commit to a defined bike path, but the plan was a portion of that 12-foot path that runs north and south along Lexington would be, devoted to bikes. When you get to the northeast corner of the site, you can, continue along Lexington, or you can take a left and go along the north side of the building, kind of in a straight shot. There is a porte cochere or a drop-off that's there that the bike lane would essentially just cut across that. So if you could bring a civil plan up, we could show it. But there is a exclusive bike path or route that is in the works.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions at this time from colleagues? If not, thank you. We are going to move forward with, well, I think there's one last question, Commissioner Said, and then we'll move forward to the public hearing.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. This is Commissioner Sayed. Two questions for applicant. In that 4 bedrooms, is that like a medium price for the tenant, or regular market? I mean, when you built it to when you finish development. And the other question is, how is your when you said the minimum rate for the rent? I couldn't get it. What is the minimum rate? Because the area is most of them are subsidized rent, and also low income rent area.
I think that question is for Mr. Osmondson.
Yeah, I think I can take that one. So I will say, in general, the rental rates that are being offered at the entire property are below market. If you look at rent studies for the LRT, for instance, or some of the apartment properties that were brought up within some of the letters that I saw that were submitted, were dramatically less than that. What I meant by the earlier distinction that this is a privately financed project with no subsidy and is in fact market rate, it just meant that we do not have the requirements of a low income housing tax credit project in which we would receive subsidy from the city of St. Paul or the state of Minnesota. We are electing and choosing to operate these with the previous sort of affordable rental rates that I mentioned, but they are not capital A. They are out of our own volition and study with what we would like to do in this area. When I was referring to area median incomes, that is sort of a tax credit discussion. It's derived for, I think, technically the 17 county metro area, which is essentially considered the Twin Cities. So that's where that statistic comes from, and it's essentially a value that takes income and looks at if 30% of your income were used for housing, how much could you afford such that you are not rent overburdened?
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments from staff? I'm closing the window so we can move into, oh, I do see And we'll go ahead and have this be our last question right now, or comment. Commissioner Ringo Morales.
So I'm glad you brought that up with regards to the area medium income and what the figures are. I'm wondering, could you tell us what, I'm sure you've priced out what the per square foot, like where you make a profit on it. And so I'm wondering what that number is for you. Not necessarily the profit, but what you will be pricing a square foot, which will give us a better idea of where these units fall with the guideline of medium income in the area.
I can, I don't know how applicable that is to disclose on this discussion with respect to the purview of the zoning committee. I mean, I can get there, but I believe I've disclosed enough information for everyone to understand what the per square foot might look like here.
Well, I'm gonna be polite and disagree. I think you have hinted about, that it's going to be less than what the, whatever ones that you have looked at. I'm not sure which those are. And so we're kind of doing this balancing where we're using terms of market rate, but then they're 450 square feet. And so, I mean, you're right. It's outside of our purview, but in the interest of understanding what is being developed, I'm just asking, what that number is so that we have an idea of, what is being built there.
Okay, well, I will respectfully disagree, but I will share it's about $2 per square foot.
Thank you.
Thanks. And Mr. Osmondson, I think what you're hearing from fellow commissioner is this item comes up time and time again with a lot of the projects, and you are correct around the specific purview of our goal today. But one of the concerns we end up having is we have a lot of projects that come in, or potential projects that come in, and there isn't always a key or an eye to true affordability with in the neighborhood that they're serving. And so what ends up happening is we hear about it from those that are in the community. And so I think that the question or the concern is coming from multiple projects or many projects before this one that comes up. And we're just trying to make sure and get a hint and an understanding of what does that affordability actually look like. So that's really where it's coming from.
I understand, Chair, and I appreciate that. And I think our development team has made every effort without any form of subsidy to, self-impose these requirements such that residents within this neighborhood and the greater region can live here. And frankly, oftentimes I don't feel that that's very respected on here when we receive questions like that. We're not asking anything, frankly, of this zoning committee, and we are doing this of our own volition because I believe in it, and I see the comments in the side about various affordability requirements. We've really pushed this for 2 years, and it's tremendously difficult, and that's where we are today. So I'll be forthright with it, but we don't get, it's a tough discussion. I recognize that, but we're not asking for anything in return.
Thanks for that. I appreciate that. As the applicant, I appreciate you providing information and insight and kind of what you all are thinking. I would also like to just say to the public that this meeting chat is not to provide information that goes to the applicant. This meeting chat is really designed for us to communicate on any type of technical difficulties or making sure that we're able to hear from and call on staff members and or commission members. So I would like to just highlight that this meeting chat is not to provide perspective or commentary on these items. That being the case, we will move forward with our public hearing. Thank you again, Mr. Osmondson. at this time, I'll open it up for the public hearing and say, is there anyone here to speak in favor of this application? Is there anyone here to speak in favor of this application?
Mr. Chair, I would like to speak in favor of this application.
Thank you so much. Could you please state your name and address for the record?
Yep. My name is Mauricio Ochoa. I live in the Midway neighborhood at 1239 Thomas Avenue. And I think after listening to the presentation by the planner, what really stood out to me was the word vacant land. That's exactly what it is, right? It's a pile of ice. It's parking for the state fair. So I am glad that we are getting development that increases the density around transit nodes. I am happy that we're developing this neighborhood node into something more urban, something higher density. And we're able to do this without displacing anybody because it's vacant land. I think this is a perfect site for it. As much as I am in favor of it, I think if we're really leaning into saying that this is transit oriented, I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done on the site plan for like the west side doesn't have any sidewalks and the entire west wall is just a solid brick wall. I think there's stuff that could be made better, but overall I'm in favor. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you so much. Appreciate those comments. Is there anyone else here to speak in favor of this application? Mr. Buck, are you here to speak in favor of the application?
Yes, I am. Am I unmuted? Yes.
Yes, you are. Could you state your name and address for the record?
I am Ian Buck, 514 Thomas Avenue West. Yeah, echoing a lot of what the previous speaker said, I think that this is a very positive development for making the area more like walkable friendly, and especially I am really appreciating the thought that they put into making this into like encouraging residents who are going to live there. Encouraging them to use bicycling as a form of transportation. I would encourage the developers to think very carefully about the nature of the bike route that they're planning on creating to take cyclists from Fuller Avenue over to towards Griggs to the west. Because it currently, it sounds like it gets them around the north side of the building, but I think people could use additional like signage and pathways to get down south on the other side of the building to the point where they can continue traveling west in that alleyway.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here to speak in favor of this application? And staff, please let me know if I'm missing anybody.
I believe way earlier on, someone said something in the chat, but they had to leave.
Okay.
And I don't know how that fits in, but it was a while ago.
Thank you, Ms. Carter. All right. Is there anyone else to speak in favor of the application?
Chair, may I speak?
Yeah, please state your name and are you speaking in favor of this application?
Yes.
Could you state your name and address for the record?
David Tallarico, 420 Lexington Parkway North, directly across the street.
Thank you.
I'm in favor of this with a question: where will visitors park? And if it will be on Lexington Parkway North, could the city consider a lit pedestrian crossway? Thanks.
Thank you so much. Is there anyone else to speak in favor of the application? Is there anyone to speak in favor of this application? Is there anyone to speak in favor of this application? All right, hearing none. We'll move forward. Is there anyone to speak in opposition of this application? I do know that there are a few people. I see Mr. Singer.
That's right.
Could you please state your name and address for the record?
My name is Andrew Singer, and I live at 2103 Berkeley Avenue in St. Paul. And my interest in being here is co-chair, along with Ian Buck, of the St. Paul Bicycle Coalition. And I was wondering if I could share my screen for a second.
Mr. Warner, I'm sorry, it's kind of new and virtual, so I don't know for sure.
Chair, unless there's a way for us to capture that, it would be really difficult to do this.
Well, I mean, they're public documents that I'm sharing.
Well, then let us know where we can find them so we can verify that they're public documents. Otherwise, just so that you know, when people present written testimony for the record, we have to get a copy of that and put it into the record. So if this is publicly available, that's great, but let us know where before you leave today.
Okay. Well, I am referring to the unanimously by the City Council approved 2015 St. Paul Bicycle Plan, which is up online. And specifically, if you go to the city's bike plan website, we're talking figure 4 facility type. And if you look at that, and this is part of the comp plan, I believe, is incorporated into the comp plan, it shows an extension of Fuller Avenue all the way to Shields Avenue. And the city may not have acted, it may not have acted on this, just as it may not have acted on the 2008 Lexington Station Area Plan, but they are in city planning documents. So to say that this project is in coherence with city planning, the comp plan or city planning documents is not exactly accurate. I know that the city required various things of this plan, including that reading it that the developer would pay for some type of crossing aid from Fuller Avenue to get over to this building. But when I look at the site plan, there is nothing about a bike lane on the northern side. Where they have located the sidewalk connection to Fuller is not well thought out, because there is a southbound left turn lane onto Fuller, which means that anyone who's in that crosswalk will potentially be in jeopardy of being hit by turning vehicles. Whereas if the crossing area had been located at the southern part of Fuller Avenue, that turn lane could have been eliminated and there could have been a safer crossing. So there wasn't a lot of thought or engineering in terms of bikes or pedestrians in this project. I don't totally fault the developer, but the city, potentially Public Works, didn't really think about this. Also, they could have put something through the development, again, wasn't really talked about. And this whole
Mr. Singer, you have about 30 seconds.
In a public way. So, but I do feel like even at this late date, I'm not against the development, but they could put something on the alley, for example, that would connect up to Dunlop and then through Peace Park to Griggs. There are various options that they still have. So I would urge this thing to be put on hold until some of these conversations happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Singer. Is there anyone else here to speak in opposition of this application? I see Deborah Mitchell. Deborah Mitchell, are you able to speak or unmute yourself? Is there anyone here to speak in opposition of this application?
Hi, I'm sorry, this is Deborah.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Mitchell.
I got disconnected and I came back on. So I'm Deborah Mitchell. I'm representing Aurora St. Anthony Neighborhood Development Corporation, located at 360 University.
Thank you, Ms. Mitchell.
Hi, and thank you, Chair and Commissioners. I am speaking on behalf of many community members that have contacted my organization who are opposed to this development. One is I know that she did some information in regard to the height of the building and how it will not impact the neighbors on I think the other side of Lexington. And many members disagree with that this building is so tall that it will impact just the shadowing for those neighbors. So that's one disagreement. And two, on the affordability, again, speaking to Frogtown and to other partners, that this is not affordable housing. This is looking at 60 AMI and not 30 AMI that represents that neighborhood. And another point I really would like to make is that site is sitting, next to Wilder, where I used to work for many years, who served the poor and the needy, and many of those people coming to that building will not be able to live in that building because of the affordability. So those are two things the neighborhood is very much against. I'm also on the Summit U Planning Council, and we have not heard from this developer for any information, any feedback. So that is my comment.
Thank you so much. I see, I think the name is Jens.
Yes, you got it right. Thank you.
Could you state your name and address for the record?
Certainly. My name is Jens, Jens, Werner, Werner. My address is 627 Selby Avenue. I'm here as the Executive Director of the Summit University Planning Council.
Thank you. And you may move forward with your statement.
Thank you. So, hello, commissioners. Thank you very much for your time. Like I mentioned, I work for the Summit University Planning Council. This site is located actually directly on the border of Summit University and the Union Park districts. So arguably the closest residential area to this project is Rondo, and these community members will be impacted the most by this project. And I do think that they need an opportunity to hear more from the developer, since the last time we heard from them was in October of 2019. While I do have a number of concerns about the site plans, for today's meeting, I will certainly only focus on the issues that you're permitted to base your decision on. So this project is inconsistent with the Lexington Station Area Plan and the St. Paul Bike Plan. Since we are on 3 hours at this point into the meeting, several community members who came here to testify had to log off. And since this project lacks community input and engagement over substantial issues, I request that this is laid over. The Lexington Station Area Plan indicates, and I quote, "Large parcels should be subdivided in order to re-establish the block grid." So when this was developed, they did not want the large space that is there to close off the community. This project is being built on 2 parcels of land. And the bike plan that keeps coming up again and again through our conversation is a huge issue. And I do think that it deserves a community forum or some way for people to engage with this. I would like to point out that the intent isn't just to create a path for bicycles. That is very ableist. It is intended to create an east to west route through the community, where currently neighbors only have St. Anthony as an option. So
Could you wrap up your comment?
Our elders, this is important, our elders who live in Carty Heights right next to this site have to take their wheelchairs into the street in the winter to access the shopping on Midway. That's why an east-west route is absolutely essential, and we need to talk about this more.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I see Jay Stenner, who seems to be here to speak in opposition for the application.
Yes, this is Joseph Steiner, S-T-I-N-E-R.
Thank you.
I own 402, 4008, and 414 with my wife, Lexington, right across. We're really not opposed. It's nice to do something with this lot. However, we do have a major concern with the traffic egress of adding 200 and some 88 units, I believe, plus the commercial to that one outlet onto Lexington, especially when it is kind of a 2-lane for a left turn onto North Lexington. We realize that there will be additional accidents coming up, and that's what we're afraid of. Also, I have to agree with the neighbor at 420, David, regarding the crosswalk. There is no crosswalk right now, painted at least, at Fuller going across at Lexington, and there's no curb cut on the other side of Lexington. Thank you.
Thank you. I also see, I think, I apologize for the mispronunciation of names. Matt Jarvie?
Correct. Thank you. Yes, my name is Matt Jarvie. I live at 1095 Stinson. I represent multiple youth organizations around here, and over the years of research I've been around and done and heard about this plan and how new buildings work, especially these high rises or these condos, apartment complexes. They say affordable housing, but there's some technology going on there because there's has to do with relative. This particular project has to do with a relative income rate in a vast diameter or radius. I mean, which goes beyond its immediate neighborhood, which is Midway and Frogtown. So, as it's not going to displace anybody outright over time, because there may only be a few affordable housing units that people in the neighborhood at their income rate can afford. It's not really representative of its immediate environment. So that's going to cause problems later on, and that's why I oppose it. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Jarvie. I also see Sarah.
Hi, I'm Sarah Nichols. I'm a resident at 690 Central Avenue, which is in the Summit U neighborhood and I live about 6 blocks away from this proposed planning. And I just wanted to say that I know that affordability is not in the scope of what we're looking at today, but because the architect developer brought it up, I just want to say that many of the residents make under $35,000 in per year. The households do, and this is very far outside of the scope of what my neighbors can afford. But the biggest thing right now is that has to do with the bike plan and just general community input, right? The last time this was brought to the Summit U Planning Council was in October of 2019. This is happening in a historically Black neighborhood. So to say that this area doesn't have anything historic is false. Our planning council deserves the opportunity to engage with our residents and talk more about it and get more input about things specifically such as like the bike plan, because the bike plan was a big change that should have been talked about. That's all I got to say.
Thank you so much. Is there anyone else here to speak in opposition of this application? Is there anyone here to speak in opposition of this application? Is there anyone here to speak in opposition of this application? All right, I want to make sure that I give Mr. Osmundson an opportunity to respond to what he's heard before we close the public hearing. If you would like to respond at all.
Yeah, absolutely, Chair and committee members. Thank you. I can certainly address some of those issues, and I'll just kind of start with what I had listed in some of the notes. The nature of the bike route, I mean, I agree. I'm a fellow bike commuter myself, bike in and out of work, do all that fun stuff in the winter too. I think in the DSI document that was issued after our official site plan review, it was noted that really the bike path connection and pedestrian circulation of that area, however it's ultimately structured, would need to really be a joint effort between the developer, the city, and the county. Lexington is a county road, so effectuating that crossing, which certainly needs to be enhanced in order for, I think, the city's ultimate bike plan to be realized, is something we're certainly willing to engage in. And as I mentioned, right now we're designing this property to accommodate existing future conditions, if that's something that the city and county choose to move forward with. We only, as the developer, have so much power to effectuate that in happening. But you know, I certainly wouldn't want to condone someone crossing Lexington at that location right now. And that's a little bit of the conflict that we had with this, in addition to, you know, the continuation that's been proposed in the various bike plans. I'm aware of the St. Paul bicycle plan that exists. You know, it does show Fuller Ave as a through road, which it is not, and does show this as a minor bike lane. I think that can be accommodated, but as Ashley had mentioned earlier from planning staff, I'm not sure why that hasn't been done in the prior 12 years that this site has been vacant. And so we're doing what we can to accommodate it, but, and we're certainly willing to make site plan improvements to do that better and mark that better. But it is, as an earlier participant mentioned, it's a little bit of a discussion between not only us as the developer, but various components of the city and county. With respects to visitor parking, on the site plan, you'll see there are 2 ingress and egress locations for vehicles. The northernmost ingress and egress location on the private drive aisle, so it's the drive aisle that's right in the middle of the block, that is specifically for guest parking, either visitors of residents or visitors of retail tenants. So it would be open and able to be engaged with much more freely than that provided for the residents. I believe it's about 15 stalls in total, so should be reasonably accommodating, in addition to availability of on-street parking in the area. I had written bike lane improvements. I understand the concerns with respects to the height. However, to go back to some of the earlier discussions around, you know, zoning and decisions that have previously been made, this is a T4 urban neighborhood zoning classification, and by right, this fits in and under that in order to provide that necessary density next to transit corridors and grocers and things of that sort, and provide the most people with the opportunity to utilize those. So I think we've done the best we can to fit it in with other economical and community considerations there. I feel like I've done more than discuss the affordable housing. For someone to state that I had brought it up, it's just been discussed here in the entire meeting chat. So I'm happy to address it, but I won't go further this evening unless there's a specific question. With regards to you know, neighborhood discussions, I think it's a bit false to say that there has been no community inputs or discussions. While it was in 2019, the essentially substantive materials of this entire project have remained the same. There were at least 6 community discussions with Union Park District Council, in which I personally went and flyered the local neighborhood area immediately surrounding this area, so that we had attendees. The meetings were hosted at the Wilder facility. We went into various communities and discussed this. We did meet with each Union Park or I should say each district council, and generally I think their land use committees. You know, some of those discussions were more fruitful than others. I would say there was a tremendous amount of input on this project to the point where it almost, you know, invalidated our purchase agreement and discussions with the Wilder Foundation, which is not of anyone's concern here, but it was something that ultimately impacted the development's feasibility. And there were just a tremendous amount of discussions, and I can't share those with you, but I mean, we did everything from, well, I wish I had the videos. So just touching on that, I think the traffic considerations, I do understand those. I think we've done a reasonable job of balancing the traffic demands. This says a more urban development. There's 288 units with 254 structured parking stalls, so less than a 1-to-1 ratio. So I don't think we're going to be inducing any additional traffic. I would hope for the opposite, and that eventually we would hopefully have parking vacancy. But for the time being, there will be individuals located here that have a car for needs outside of those that can be borne, you know, through the transit corridor. But I think generally adjacent residents will be surprised by the lack of traffic that comes from residential facilities. It's not nearly as high as anything like a commercial use or an entirely retail use, especially as we're transitioning more and more quickly away from, you know, actually going to work all of the time. I think we're going to see a lot of those traffic demand management components and velocities decreasing. So those were kind of the comments that I had heard. I hope I was able to address everything.
Thank you.
And I'll turn it back to you, Chair.
We appreciate that. Thank you for providing comments and answering questions, providing perspectives. I'm going to start to close this section. Committee members, are there any other quick questions for the applicant? At this time, then, we are closing the public hearing of this portion of the application, and I would like to move forward with my colleagues for discussion and/or motion. All right, I'm getting to it. Commissioner Grill.
I'm wondering if we can get just a little bit of a reminder or clarification, because there are so many people on the call, of what the difference is between this and some of the other items we heard tonight. So just maybe even from staff, just calling out the difference between having a site plan pulled and brought to the Planning Commission, and the difference between that and, say, approving variances or something where we have a little bit more flexibility. I just have a little bit concerned that there might be people in the room that don't know the distinction, and I just don't want them to be surprised by, I think, some of the proceedings.
Commissioner Grill, just to clarify, are you asking staff to provide information around the commission's authority on some of these items?
Yeah, what the criteria is that we can use to make a decision on a site plan versus variances.
Okay, I guess I'll start with staff. Ms. Sakarda, would you like to respond, or any other staff member?
Hi, Tia, did you want to respond on this one?
Sure. Chair Baker. Yes, Chair Baker, Commissioner Grill, this is Tia Anderson, also of the Department of Safety and Inspections. I work with Ashley, coordination of site plan review. Within the zoning code, there are 11 findings for site plan review. And typically, site plan is a function that is delegated from the Planning Commission to city staff, and that is a function that Ashley and I coordinate on behalf of the Planning Commission then. And so our role is to bring together reviewers from across departments as well as other involved jurisdictions, in this particular instance, Ramsey County. So typically it's a staff administered site plan review, and that then staff decision is appealable to the Planning Commission. So on occasion, you may see a site plan on appeal. The other way that site plans might come before the Planning Commission is in the instance of this one, where the Planning Commission voted in December to bring this site plan forward for this body's review and ultimately a decision. That still requires staff across departments to do our technical reviews. And so certainly if there are further questions on things like bike lanes and the ped bike paths and some of those technical items that people have been discussing, we're happy to try to clarify that further. But a lot of the technical aspects of the plan have been reviewed, or there are some things that are still being worked out, and that is part of then the recommendation that Ashley has given here for approval, but with the condition that those technical views reach their conclusion with staff, such as forestry, public works, and regional water.
Thanks, Ms. Anderson. I see Commissioner Lindeke and then Commissioner Rangel Morales.
This is a question for staff, but I'm not sure if any staff will know the answer to this, so it's okay if you don't. But the Peace Park that's at Griggs is also on the potential right of way that is being talked about with the bike plan. And was there accommodation in that project for having an east-west bike or through route? It's a park, so currently there's a fence there, but I'm just curious if that's something the city has been doing on parcels in this that's technically on the theoretical right of way. I don't know if anyone in staff knows that or not.
Staff
member? Yes, Ms. Scarda, I'll field this one as well. Chair Baker, Commissioner Lindeke, this is Tia Anderson again. That is a site plan that I did work on, the Midway Peace Park, and anecdotally, I don't have the plans in front of me obviously right now. Certainly this was an item that came up in that discussion, and that was a year or so ago. And also at that time, recognizing that, the city has not made a move to acquire land or easements to allow for that ped bike infrastructure that would be east-west if it were to be aligned with Fuller. And so the Midway Peace Park was, allowed to go forward with its plans. I will say, very similar to this project, as we acknowledged across departments, that this east-west ped bike connection is called for in plans, but acknowledged that the right-of-way hasn't been acquired, that we wanted to make sure that we were at least future-proofing. And so, for example, on the Midway Peace Park, there's a large water structure there, for example. And so just making sure that we were thoughtful about the location of that water structure. And I believe there's maybe some, I want to say there's maybe some amphitheater space there. I can't remember exactly, but we were thoughtful about where we put that infrastructure at Midway Peace Park. Similarly here, as parks, public works, planning, DSI, Ramsey County have come together on conversations about Fuller Avenue and east-west ped bike connections. Again, absent the acquisition of land for that east-west route, absent the detailed development plans for that infrastructure. What is proposed here in the site plan, both for north-south along Lexington Parkway, as well as the route for ped bikes to the north and then around the west side of the building was really designed with future proofing in mind, so that it would not preclude that future public investment in ped bike infrastructure.
Thanks, Ms. Anderson. Mr. Ringo Morales.
First, a comment on Commissioner Grill's question, and then a question follow up on this bike path, as well as the impact of traffic. But so first, I think this is, as the applicant noted, they're not asking the city for anything. They're building a building which they have a right to build. You know, whether it's market rate or subsidized housing or whatever it is, they have every right to build whatever it is. And so my question earlier was more just for transparency for the people that were calling in, because I figured there was several questions about that. I highlight that just to say that this is yet another example of where if we work towards developing a policy to apply to the city overall, it could be a discussion that we can nip in the bud and just it could be part of what St. Paul wants to build going forward. And so this is, again, another example of us not doing that. Specifically talking about the inclusionary zoning study. With regards to the bike path, I just have a problem understanding if this bike path is incorporated into you know, various different plans, why the city wouldn't have an incentive to start the process now to begin going on it. It seems like the response that we're getting is it hasn't been done and it hasn't been developed by anybody, but nobody really wants to start the process of building that part of the path. So I don't, well, that's my question. And then the second one is, I do have concerns with the commercial building, as some of the people who spoke. That is anybody who's been to that Aldi and tries to exit out into Lexington going, what is that, south. It's a very busy intersection, even just trying to get out of there. Adding that much traffic, you know, whether the applicant thinks that people are going to stay home and not drive and not use the 256 parking spots or however many they're going to build. On top of that, whatever commercial space goes in there, whatever it ends up being, is going to have a huge detriment to the congestion of that traffic, and that's not in my opinion, really set up to handle that type of traffic. But you know, so I am concerned about that, and so I'm wondering if there is a way to include some form of language in the site plan where, if that becomes a problem, the owner or the applicant would be responsible for mitigating it in some way.
And that is Commissioner Ringo Morales. I'm assuming you're asking staff right now.
Yes. So
okay.
The first question is why are we St. Paul not the first ones to try to initiate the starting of this addition to the bike path? And then two, if we can incorporate language that if it does become a problem with traffic, we don't want another Starbucks situation. So can we add language that says that the applicant will be responsible for mitigating and you know, taking care of the traffic congestion?
I'd like to turn it over to staff to respond to Commissioner Ringo Morales, and I'm also interested from legal perspective if Mr. Warner wanted to chime in.
Chair, I'm going to jump in front of you to Commissioner Ringo Morales' question about the traffic. The difficulty is that's not our road. And as we've discovered with Starbucks, neither Snelling or Marshall belongs to the city. So it's the state of Minnesota and Ramsey County by Starbucks, and Lexington is a Ramsey County street. So even if we could compel them to do something, I don't know that Ramsey County would okay it. It's their right of way. So we don't have any real control over that. And to Tia, it's my understanding that Ramsey County participated in the site plan review. And what was their reaction to the traffic studies?
Yes, Chair Baker, Commissioner Rango Morales, Mr. Warner, this is Tia Anderson. Yes, I will state that this past summer, fall, as we were having cross-department public works, parks, PED, DSI, Ramsey County conversations, that, likewise, Ramsey County had no imminent plans for modifications on Lexington Parkway. We did, talk about traffic patterns and traffic access, and generally, Public Works and Ramsey County are supportive of the fact that there are no curb cuts on the Lexington Parkway, that all of the traffic is really being managed within the private development site, both through the porte cochere pickup drop-off area, as well as the two structured parking accesses. And so from their perspective, Ramsey County and Public Works, those are positive aspects of the vehicular traffic. I'll note that as a condition of approval, that we're recommending that the traffic impact study be accepted by traffic engineering. So there have been a couple of iterations of that traffic impact study between our city traffic engineer and the project team's traffic engineer who's preparing that study. At this point in time, I would say there are just minor tweaks that they are continuing to make before our traffic engineering division is in a position to accept that study. But generally speaking, both Public Works and Ramsey County are supportive of the fact that the traffic is being managed on private property and not within the right of way. In fact, there was explicit conversation about making sure that we don't have pickup drop-offs on Lexington Parkway.
I do see Director Pereira, and I think I also maybe still see the hand of Mr. Warner as staff.
Chair, I do have my hand up. Thank you. But if the planning administrator has a question, I'll defer to him.
I have a point to make that sort of responds to Commissioner Ranel Morales's question earlier of staff. And so my colleague here on the team, Katie Dadless, pointed out, reminded me, it's also partly addressed in the staff report, that this project started out with a concept for a bike ped lane through the site. And part of the idea actually went for a Livable Communities grant to help fund some of those improvements through the site. Ultimately, a series of things happened where the grant was not accepted, and so therefore that money is not available for the project to implement those improvements. The newer design, the one that you're seeing now, I think the applicants talked a lot about, the way that a sort of a bike infrastructure is incorporated on the northern, kind of wrapping around the northern part of the building, and some commitment to continue to make that better. But this was an early conversation with the site plan, lots of conversations with PED, Public Works, Parks and Rec, and so that's something for you to know as a historic note. Second, and actually this is where my confidence level goes down a little bit. Tia and I were just chatting for around the Midway Peace Park. I'm fairly certain there was a condition or some sort of requirement made of Parks and Rec for the Midway Peace Park design to have some facility or accommodation for east-west path through that site. And I was recalling it being maybe with a plat or possibly with a site plan, but Tia was going to look into that, and so we can provide more information when we have that to you. you know, as it relates to, you know, I guess the difference between the two sites are the city of St. Paul has, you know, a lot more control over sites that are being planned as a public park as opposed to, you know, a privately owned site. And so just something to keep in mind. They're not the same. You know, the sites are kind of created differently in that way.
Mr. Warner.
Thank you, Chair. The only other thing that I was going to add, and this is to piggyback onto Tia's comments about the traffic study, is if the traffic engineer should come back with some recommendations for, lack of a better term, some mitigation requirements with respect to traffic that's generated from the site, that certainly would be within the purview of the committee to add a condition to the site plan that would require the developer to follow the recommendations from the traffic engineer based on the traffic study.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to start to close this portion of the our time together. Any other quick questions or comments in discussion as we move forward with a vote? All right, I will entertain a motion. Commissioner Lindeke.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to approve the staff report, make staff recommendation to approve the site plan.
I have a motion. Do we have a second?
Commissioner Grill, I'll second.
Seconded by Commissioner Grill. Any further discussion before the motion?
I'll just comment a little bit about this because I live 3 blocks away from here, and it's been a property I've been paying attention to. A lot of people in the community have been talking about it, and you can see that in the comments we've received. A lot of really thoughtful and you know, concerned people who are expressing their opinions about the housing crisis that I know we've talked about here at the commission for a long time. And I've been on the commission now for 9 years, and this might be one of my last zoning committee meetings. And I know we've been tackling this affordability issue for such a long time. With it seems like not much progress being made, although you know we're approving new housing around the city, but it's still a huge problem for a lot of people to afford the rent. So anyway, Commissioner Rangel Morales' comment about how we need an inclusionary zoning study to be done here in St. Paul, I agree we should do that. But the other thing I'd like to just point out is that this project would certainly meet any criteria that we would probably do. Minneapolis's inclusionary zoning ordinance requires 8% of the units in a market rate project to be under 60% AMI. And this one is, I think in all the years I've been here at the commission, the most affordable market rate project I've seen. I don't know if there's one that anyone else can think of that has more affordable units that they're producing without subsidy, but 144 units at 60 or below is a lot. And so that's really the question that I have is this property has been a vacant lot for 12 years. And I think was vacant before that too. I researched it once, and it went back to the 60s as being sort of empty land. And the question that's before us is really just, is this site plan correct or not? And I think it is. There's some questions about the bicycle project, but I don't really think we should hold the developer to that standard that's not being done anywhere else here. And I also think it's too bad that grant that they had applied for didn't come through, because that would have probably solved that problem. At least that's my reading of the Pioneer Press article that was that's about this project. So the question I'm just thinking about is, do we want to keep this vacant lot for longer, or should we put housing on it? I don't see any reasons in the site plan to vote against it. So that's why I'm proposing the motion today.
Thanks, Mr. Lindeke. I'm going to ask for my colleagues that Commissioner Saeed be the last person to comment. Commissioner Saeed.
Thanks, Chair. Well, I live like let's say a mile and a half from where the new construction is. I am concerned that the rent for the neighbors. I know the neighbors are subsidized and low incomes, and some of them are, you know, they get help from the government, and the applicant didn't clarify when he says 60% of the minimum, and I'm really concerned about the amount of the, you know, the money that, you know, the neighbors that might be more than what they're paying right now. Yeah, that's my concern, that you know, we're yeah, as my colleague said, that we are, you know, we are welcome for a developer, but that the rent and the value of the house even might go up to the area. That's my concern.
Thank you, Commissioner Saeed. As we close this portion right before the vote, the only thing that I'd say is, first of all, thanks for all those that participated in the public comment portion. Appreciate hearing your perspective, and also understanding that this has been a vacant lot for a long time. Also, I was understanding that there are some things that I feel like neighbors are going to need. I do want to highlight the difference between needing more information and needing more clarity around certain things, and then also not agreeing with the decision. I do think that those are two distinct things. And I just want to make sure I as a commissioner, do see that and understand that. I do think that in the middle of this pandemic and all the issues that are going on, that it is definitely incumbent upon the developer and staff to provide, as I say, over communicate what's going on, providing information. And I think that there will be some that disagree with this development, but I do agree with moving forward with the development because it has been a vacant lot, and as we all know, a big pile of snow for years. And so with that, I think it is the right thing to do. We'll move forward with the vote.
Commissioner Edgerton? Commissioner Edgerton?
Yes. Yes.
Commissioner Grill?
Yes. Yes.
Commissioner Hood?
Yes.
Commissioner Lindeke?
Yes.
Commissioner Rangel Morales?
No.
Commissioner Saeed?
No.
And Chair Baker?
Yes.
5 in favor, 2 oppose.
Thank you all. That was our last item, and that motion passed. This now is going to conclude our zoning committee meeting. Thank you for sticking it out with us for an almost 4-hour meeting, but I do think that the conversation and discussion was helpful, and thank you for commissioners for your time. At that, I'd like to end this zoning committee meeting. Thank you all, and have a great rest of your evening.
Yep. Thank you. Take care.